One, and we are live. Kieran Westlake,
Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon.
good
Not sure which one
morning
it
to
is.
you, my friend.
Yes, it is.
Thanks for doing this.
No problem.
This is going to be a lot of fun. You and I never struggle for shit to talk about. And
Yep.
I really love our conversations. We solve all the problems of the coffee world whenever we do it.
Well, we theorize at least.
We
I'm not sure
theorize
about
it, we
you and the
attempt to,
solving
yeah.
part. Yeah. Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know uh, what you do, let's
Yep.
talk about you and kind of set the stage so that people can figure out who this human is. It's Kieran Westlake that you tend to hide in the shadows and get a fuck ton of things done.
Yeah. Oh, pretty simple. I come from a hospitality family. My mum and dad used to own pubs in England. Moved to Australia. They had a restaurant in Australia. And unfortunately, that restaurant burnt down and sent my parents to the wall. And so that was probably my earliest childhood memories of. I loved hospitality, but I also understood the pitfalls and the pain that can come out of those things. My
Mm.
parents were super resilient, so I didn't really understand that until much later in life. But and then when I was at university studying pharmacokinetics, which is basically designing drugs, legal ones, um,
I've never
I
heard
was
that term before. Pharmacokinetics.
yeah, so like the really boring stuff, you sit in a lab all day and pipette things, and theorize around what could be a better binding agent for Panadol. It's really boring, to be honest. And so I was still working in hospitality, was running nightclubs and stuff, and uh, finally decided that I hated being in a lab and needed to go and get a real job. And I heard about sales, and pharmacy sales reps seem to have a car, an $80,000 salary, and a free laptop and phone. I thought that's like the
Living the
bee's knees.
dream.
Yeah, it's like wow, I should go and do that. Never did. Um, Went and worked for a hospitality equipment finance company instead in my spare time as a in their warehouse, and then ended up bouncing around the company for a while. Was the state manager for Queensland for a while, then moved to Canada and launched the Canadian business with four other intrepid travelers. And then 2014, I came back to Australia to launch the coffee channel within the global business, which basically the really unique way is to provide capital and options to cafes and roasteries to allow them to grow and succeed, but try and mitigate some of that risk and that personal risk and have a plan for when it doesn't work out. I know the business likes to harp on about the 30,000 people they've helped achieve their dreams over the last 30 years, but probably my biggest statistic that I believe in the most, I think, is probably the one around the back end. So the amount of people we've saved from bankruptcy and the amount of family units that have been saved by that is probably for me the biggest calling card of the company. But that's the day job that pays the bills. That also, because of the coffee channel, allowed me to meet some really cool people. Get to know the Australian Specialty Coffee Association and its board at the time, who invited me to come on to join the board in 2015 as treasurer. Uh, that was an interesting
Oh, I
little
can
period.
only imagine. I can't wait to get deep down into that
Yeah,
dive
yeah, yeah.
with
Let's get
you.
the finance guy on. He'll know how to fix this. Um, yeah, so did that, and then went into the vice president role for a year and a bit, and set up our new sponsorship agreements and basically menu board style for our national competitions of the whole uh, of ASCA, and then rolled into president at the end of September last year, and then it's just been a cruisy ride ever since. I
How long have you been with Silver Chef? That's the day job.
uh, yeah, 11 years. So 11 years in March.
Is
I've
that how long they've
done
been
just
in
over.
Australia?
No, they've been in Australia since 1986, so 33
Okay.
years this year. They've been in New Zealand for 10, and they've been in Canada for 5 now. So, with the outlook is to look at the US in the coming, well, except for a few issues within our business from another company, a sister company we ran. We probably would have been in the US by now, but
Hmm.
that's just been put on this go slow mode for the moment until we can finalize some things here in Australia and then look to the future.
That sounds awesome. There's a couple of my clients here that I've tried to find the equivalent of Silver Chef over here, because I know a bunch of my friends in Australia. And just to be clear to anyone who's listening, Silver Chef does not sponsor this podcast. I'm not in any way incentivized to say what I'm about to say. There is no financial relationship between Map It Forward and Silver Chef, just to clarify all of this. But a bunch of my friends have been able to open their businesses in Sydney because of Silver Chef. They didn't have the capital up front, and they were able to build relationships with you guys. So they were enabled to start their businesses. And some of them have gone on to do amazing things because they knew how to run a business or knew how to ask people to help them learn how to run businesses. And
That's
others others have fucked it up completely and buried themselves into a hole and pretty much destroyed the rest of their financial life. So,
it can happen and much faster than people anticipate. So,
let's talk about that a little bit, Kieran, because, the financial way that the world, in our world, the coffee world, approaches their own success can be very, very inspiring on some levels and can be absolutely heartbreaking on others. How have you experienced? Because let's tell people what Silver Chef does exactly, and then we can move from there.
Yeah. So Silver Chef is a hospitality equipment finance company, but only for equipment. The reason for that is it allows us to do some really cool stuff. So what we do is we buy equipment on behalf of the client and then we rent it to them. When we do that, it makes it the financing off balance sheet, which means it doesn't affect their ability to borrow for other things, either personal or for that business unit. It allows it to be 100% tax deductible in all the markets that we're in. A tax saving benefit there as well. But the main priority there is because the asset is owned by Silver Chef, it allows Silver Chef, and we're an asset management company. We used to be an importer distributor for equipment. We understand equipment first and foremost. So we're much more comfortable and secure in the fact that if we own the equipment, we don't have to take as many personal guarantees or director's guarantees or security or liens on someone's house or all that other traditional financing sort of options where most banks will weigh you up and go, how much stuff do you have? Do you have more assets than the money we're going to lend you? Great. We're going to take a security in that and have no risk. So if you fault on this loan, we'll just take all your other assets. That's typically how financing works. In our instance, we go, no, we'll buy the equipment and that will be our security or our collateral, and then we'll rent it too. By doing that rental program, it allows us to build in some really cool models. And the first being, the only commitment is 12 months. So if you rent something for 12 months and at the end of that 12 months, you go, this site, this business, this location, this piece of equipment, to the absolute, granular point, like I just hate this one particular grinder because it's got a gremlin in it. You can return that, no questions asked. Great. And then you stop paying for that piece of equipment. You've never paid the full capital value of it. And that's a kind of get out of jail free card on choosing the wrong site, choosing the wrong business, or choosing the wrong piece of equipment. The other one that we can build into it, because we own the equipment and because we're really comfortable with the equipment side of things, is we allow people to be actually able to upgrade as well. So if they do, and sensibly, if they are starting out, they try and reduce their costs as much as possible to give them the best chance of getting to break even quickly, to be able to build up capital to buy out some of the equipment. They can actually go, so I've got a 2 group, I'm going to keep my costs low for the beginning, but my volumes increase so much I need to upgrade to a 3 group. Great. They can actually upgrade that. All they do is we go out and buy them the new one. The new rental is based on the new value of the new asset, and the old asset is returned to Silver Chef, and we deal with that. And that's a really good option for basically never actually committing to a piece of equipment until it's the right piece of equipment for the business. The other option, though, in that 12 months is you can buy any item at any time and you receive a rental rebate. So your rent isn't dead money. It's going towards the ownership of that piece of equipment if you choose to want to own it. And it's a bit like cars and any other sort of capital equipment. Sometimes you just don't want to own these things because there's no value in owning them.
Yeah.
The use of the actual asset is what drives your profit or drives your business. And so that's really what you're out for. Actual ownership, a bit like, fleet cars, you just roll them back every 2 or 3 years. It's the same kind of concept. But there is definitely assets that you want to build up into your balance sheet because that provides you basically value for when you go and sell the business.
Yep.
So that's your basic model throughout the Silver Chef piece. That's common in every market we're in. Is basically those options. So that we buy the asset, we rent it to somebody, we give them the option to purchase or upgrade at any time, and they can purchase it or give everything back at 12 months. In each market, there's a slight variation of what happens after that. There's usually discount structures, ownership pathways. It just depends on the legislation of each country that we're in, what happens after that. But every jurisdiction does have a discounting structure to go towards ownership without having to have the cash flow pressure of purchasing at that 12-month mark.
Do you guys do this just for, yeah, absolutely. Great explanation. And do you do this for cafes as well as roasteries or just cafes?
We do that particular rent try buy product for anybody in hospitality across the board. So you can have a dumpling bar, you could have a microbrewery, you could have a roastery, you could have a cafe. The actual core product doesn't really change. What does change is the intent of the user or our customer, and therefore how they use the choose your own adventure story, because that's what it is. And so what that means is that, for example, a roastery, they're probably a really good example of, so when they do an equipment on loan program, they want to deploy an asset, that's taking a lot of risk. For a roastery, they may be buying $10,000 or $20,000 of equipment, and they're giving it to someone else. That's them actually becoming a bank for that client. And that's a really high level of risk for a roastery. And so if they deploy that down the line to that cafe, they may want to mitigate some of that risk or not have that much capital tied up into that other person's business. So they may use our funds to do that. That allows them to basically go, look, if this person hits all their targets of, say, 20 or 30 kilos a week in supply, great. You can have that piece of equipment. If it goes below that, they have an option to return it to Silver Chef or get out of that piece of equipment and not be tied into having a fixed cost, which actually could damage their business going forward. So
Can we
quickest
talk
way to
about that for a second?
Yep.
I have a real problem with the idea that roasters are the secondhand salespeople of of coffee of espresso machine manufacturers.
Yep.
Why haven't we fixed this yet? Why aren't the the espresso manufacturing companies selling their own fucking machines? Why are they using roasters as a mechanism to get that out there?
To be honest, I'd say that's actually been driven by roasters more so than it has been by the manufacturers. Manufacturers, by large, and this is very generalized, would prefer to use a service network as their reselling network. The reason for that is they can then pass the warranty component down the line and increase the margin for a reseller, because they will then take on the warranty component and be able to supply that. That means they don't have to employ as many techs across a very large market, say like Australia, which is a pain in the ass to cover, or for, say, the States, right? Like that's it's a huge market, so that would be a huge amount of employment cost. That is typically why they prefer, generally, to go to a service agent network to have it just as a reselling thing. The problem with that, though...
Sorry to interrupt you there. We hear from an astronomical number of roasters asking the question of, why do I have to be a salesperson, a passive salesperson for the manufacturers? Because they don't want to do it.
So I think it's because a few are half of them do want to do it and then half don't. And unfortunately, the half that do forces the half that don't to have to engage in that sort of side.
So you're talking about the bigger companies who can afford the cash flow that's required to invest in that.
Yeah, or to be honest, it's not even cash flow at some point. It can be just on terms. It depends on the manufacturer, depends on your trading history, all that sort of stuff. But essentially, a roaster may want to do it in for a few different reasons. One, and the first and foremost one, is usually around brand. So they choose to leverage a manufacturer's brand to increase the brand value of their own company or business. For example, and no affiliation here, I'm just plucking one out of the air. Veneziano, back in the day, aligned themselves heavily with La Marzocco. La Marzocco just come out of doing the sponsorship for the Worlds. It's still one of the best run brands in the world as far as specialty coffee goes, and so a lot of people will hitch their wagon to that wagon, and that's one really good play, is that you can set yourself apart by leveraging someone else's brand to give you separation in your own market. So that defines where you sit, and then for them that was in that specialty range. The other way to the reason you want to do it is because there is money to be made out of selling the equipment as well, and so that they can buy it at a wholesale value and they can then sell that at a retail value. Pretty simply,
a lot of them can't sell it though. Like a lot of the smaller guys just can't afford to do it. It's the thing that ends up breaking them.
Yeah, so a lot of them, and this is the funny thing, right? So in every market, there is, it has crept into every market, there is equipment on loan. And typically that's come around from your first or second generation or second wave sort of coffee. And that's the traditional way of doing it. But the asset cost for those machines was always much, much lower. For a roaster, you're not cash flowing, $10,000, $20,000 for an account. You're cash flowing maybe $2,000 to $5,000, maybe $6,000, maybe $8,000. And that was the traditional way. But also back in when that first started, businesses were owned for longer. So, for example, someone actually built a cafe because that was a wealth creation asset. That was something that they could own for 30 years and then pass to their children.
Yeah, back in the 90s.
They'd at least own it for 6 years, essentially. Today, most people don't own a cafe or a hospitality business for more than 2, because they don't make money during owning it. They make money when they sell it.
It's kind of astronomical, isn't it? Because when we started out in this industry, you could work for someone for a bunch of years. Now, if you want to stay somewhere, you may work at the same place under 2 or 3 different owners in that time, huh?
Yep. It's and that's the first thing I ask any particular client in any business, to be honest. Doing consulting or just working within the hospitality space or just talking around what someone wants to achieve. Intent for me is the most important thing to really be clear on as an operator, as an entrepreneur. And the easiest way and people do, like, what do you mean by intent? Like, why is that important? And the easy answer to that is basically that I pose as a question. And I'll pose it to you, Lee. What's the difference between murder and manslaughter?
Yeah, mens rea.
Intent, right? Did you intend to kill this person?
Right.
It's murder. Did you not? Then it's manslaughter. And the outcome there is very, very different, right? It's a difference between 10 and 20 years. Still shit outcome, but that's the difference.
Just for anyone who heard me say mens rea and has no idea, if thinks I'm male bashing or something like that, mens rea is the Latin term for intent in legal. So sorry, I just don't need to get a bunch of emails about that. Go on.
That's right. I actually understood because my better half's a lawyer who taught me this lesson. So like for me, that's the most important thing. So someone understands their intent. So like I've had a cafe as well, and my intent was to learn. I knew I wasn't going to make huge amounts of money, so my intent was to learn a lot, walk the walk, feel have that experience of being in the shoes of my clients, and also then hopefully not lose any money. But my intent was absolutely to sell that business within 2 years.
Yep.
So because of that intent, that formed a lot of the decisions, or that actually framed when I looked at how was I going to fund this, how was I going to procure the equipment, what equipment would I procure, how would I position my business, what equipment would I put in there from a coffee machine point of view to attract the right staff. That formulates a lot of the things that you'll do, just understanding that. So like my intent is to own this business for 10 years. I probably would have done things slightly differently.
Right.
And so
what are the questions that you find that people don't ask themselves that they should be asking themselves. It sounds like what's my intention is the first one that they should be asking. But what are the flow-on questions that should follow that so that they can help set up their businesses? Because it's just heartbreaking to see the number of people that are running themselves and pretty much their financial future into the fucking ground because they didn't set their businesses up properly from the onset.
100% agree. And to be honest, I learned all the advice I've ever given anybody. I ignored most of it and did it badly for myself. So,
we all do.
Exactly. We all. It's like the builder with the worst house on the street.
Right.
So defining intent, 100%. That's where you start. The second question is, okay, that's perfect world situation. That's what you intend to do. What's the plan for when it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
What's your exit strategy? What's the how are you going to mitigate that not occurring? And so people will go, well, what do you mean by that? And say, well, okay, so you forecasted to do $10,000 a week in sales, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you're only doing 5?
Right.
Can that business still survive, and can you pay yourself a livable wage?
How long can you sustain that? We call in Map It Forward, we call them trigger numbers. So how long what's the number that you're comfortable with your what's your risk appetite for that? Mm-hmm. What's the number that you're going to reach that you're going to hit and say, well, actually, if I hit this number, I'm not going to be able to afford to live. I'm not going to be able to afford to pay myself. How long can I go on doing that? It's that kind of a thing. So we call them trigger numbers. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So from a financing side, it's and when we look at financials, it's basically you break even. So essentially you've got a set of fixed costs and then obviously your own wage that you need to be able to survive as a human being and your family unit. What level of revenue will satisfy those fixed costs, the variable costs that allow you to sell that amount of things? That's your break-even number. Essentially, that needs to be much lower than your forecast, is in simple terms. So if you're forecasting 10 and your break-even number is 6 and your pessimistic view's 7 or 8, well, cool. You're not going to go.
You're going to survive.
You will survive. You'll wear those downturns. It's not going to be fun, but you'll get through it. And you'll have a chance to at least improve it and work on it and grow the business over time. If that break-even number is, say, 9,000 and you're forecasting 10, I can tell you right now, 6 months later, you're probably not going to be in business. And that's just the cold, hard reality of numbers, essentially, and running out of capital happens very quickly.
Do you when you meet people and you're asking them these kinds of questions, can you pretty much pick it now, the people who are going to survive and the people who aren't?
When I was younger, I said yes. As I've gotten older, I say no. People surprise me, to be honest.
Do they really?
Yeah, some of the concepts I'm like, seriously, mate? Like, I'm not sure where you think I know where your confidence is coming from, but it's amazing. Just bottle it and take it with you. And people are cluier than you sometimes give them credit for. But at the same time, I think I've gotten more comfortable with the ones that I definitely can pick the ones where I think they've got a really good chance. But you can never say yes or no, because you can have, and this is the thing that I think a lot of really successful roasters, really successful entrepreneurs have learned, especially in hospitality. You can have a fantastic product, absolutely fantastic product.
Means nothing.
You can have some of the best training. You can invest in your staff. You can have the best culture. You can have the best location. But there can be something about that particular location or situation that just doesn't work, and you can't foresee it. Yeah. And so that's why it's really important to go back to, okay, my intent is to succeed at this site and to grow it and sell it in 2 years. But for whatever reason, it's the unknown unknowns. So how do I mitigate my risk from the unknown unknowns?
Yeah.
So if it all goes pear-shaped, what is my exit strategy? What is the options I'm going to have? How am I going to sell this thing? How do I get out? How do I get released from the landlord? Those sort of questions are really, really important. So you ask any, and it's usually the third or the second cafe that sinks the first cafe or the successful business. For roasteries, it's usually having multiple cafes rather than just concentrating on the wholesale.
Yeah.
That's in the Australian market. In the US market, it's slightly different. But yeah, so it's always a risk. And so being too confident in oneself is sometimes the downfall of really successful
Oh,
entrepreneurs.
yeah. And I just said something there that was incorrect. Like, having a great product doesn't mean nothing. I said it means nothing. That's not true. It means something, but it means a lot less than not having customers. So
I've seen some of the most successful cafes with some of the worst coffee I've ever seen.
and that's my
And
point
I
with
refuse
that.
to drink it, but
Yeah,
they're doing 100 kilos a week. So
exactly.
good on them. They're doing something right.
And that's where, like, you having the best product in the world means fuck all if you have no customers that want to buy it.
Pretty much.
But it does mean something if you want to work on bringing customers in the door, and part of your business model is, you know, I'm going to have a really great product, and you're positioned yourself in a space where people want to buy that.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually. Like, for me, this again goes back to the intent of the business, right? So for exactly that example, so that means you're probably more likely a specialty store. You're probably a destination cafe. In the
Yep.
Australian market, you have good Instagrammable food as well as good coffee. You may have an alternative brewing method. You're investing in your people. You're attracting the right staff, all that sort of stuff. That's because that's a product-driven repeat business. So good quality product means people keep coming back. And it's convenient for parking, all that sort of stuff, or whatever the other factors need to be. Having said that, then you go to ones that, you know, you're in an airport. It doesn't matter what you serve. It's about the cafe at that point.
Yeah.
To be honest, you could just, like, what you've done is you've bought a real estate piece and you just need to serve as much as you possibly can out of that site.
Volume is what the focus of your business model needs to be there, rather than necessarily quality.
Yeah, controlling cost and then volume.
Yeah.
It's all about volume and trying to drive as many things as you can to get economy of scale, and that's going to drive the profitability of that particular style of business. And both work, and both are for different types of operators and different types of people, because that's different philosophies in business, right?
Very much so. What do we say to people who want to try and push a certain agenda and it's just not working?
Look, to be honest, I tried to do that as well. Probably another example, and I don't think you mind me saying, is ones like in California, Handsome Coffee. I used to love the story of those guys. It was everything that I always dreamed of doing. So have a cafe and you only serve coffee that you would drink. So therefore, it was basically you get two options, black or white. There's no sugar. It's full cream milk if you're getting white coffee, and I give you whatever I decide I think is delicious.
And we all know how that turned out.
Yep. I did almost the same thing. It's like I refused to put in sugar in the cafe. I had no syrups. I refused to put in 16-ounce cups. Everything was a 6 or a 12. Within, I think, 6 weeks, I had 16-ounce cups. I had syrups because I had construction workers across the road that were basically cash flowing my entire business on the volume of syrups that they purchased. It's the reality of the world. You give the people what they want. As long as it's the best version, it's still within the philosophy you're buying. So your buying philosophy. So local, bit more boutique, didn't buy the lowest brand stuff. It still fit within the brand that I was trying to create, because that was what essentially the asset I was going to sell in the future. As long as it fit within that window, then I learned to come to terms with it and accept the money that the people were trying to offer me. So yeah, you do learn these things.
And the other side of that is, I mean, we're not saying if you're a vegan cafe and you have an ethical reason behind what you're doing.
Oh, just
that's
have
not the same
chicken.
thing.
Yeah, soy chicken's delicious.
well,
I mean, honestly.
When we're not saying that if you have an ethical reason for not serving certain things, that's not the same as what you're saying, Kieran. You know?
No, that was just my
exactly
super snobby kind of decision making.
There's a difference, right? There's this difference between ethical approaches and elitist approaches.
Yeah.
I'm not calling you an elitist. I'm just saying that the approach that you were taking, you're like, I was absolutely trying to do that.
I was absolutely that way inclined, and it was, to be honest, a good life lesson. So,
but so, what we would tend to, and I'd love to hear what you think on this. I guess going back to that intent is what's so important with regards to that. If you have an ethical reason for opening a business, go find your people first, and then figure out how you're going to open the business, right?
Yeah, if you're in Newtown in Sydney, or in Santa Monica or somewhere, and you can definitely open a vegan juice bar with hippie burgers and stuff, or West End in Brisbane. If you're in Parramatta, or I don't know, in somewhere in Pennsylvania or somewhere in the States where it's a hard,
might not work,
old school coal town or something, then your likelihood of success is going to go down. Understanding your own demographics and who you're going to sell something to is quite important. So,
does Silver Chef offer advice and assistance and support for that kind of a thing?
Look, what we do is we provide many tools. We can't go as far as to give advice just because of the legal ramifications of that.
Yeah.
But we always do make sure that we guide people into a pathway that is going to provide them that advice. So, like, for me, the number one thing outside of understanding the intent and doing all that sort of stuff is getting a solid foundation to be able to grow your business. And what I mean from that is, what is the legal structure that you've set up of your business? So once you've understand all the, that's the planning stage of the intent and all the, what product I'm going to serve, who I'm going to serve it to, all that demographic sort of stuff. A lot of good or clue enough to get most of that done, and that's the exciting part.
Yeah.
The part that comes after that's the boring part, and it's the expensive part, and everyone goes, why should I pay lawyers or accountants? It's because they give you advice, and you then get to leverage their professional indemnity insurance. So if they give you bad advice, they have an insurance policy that you can sue, essentially. Very, very important. But not just that. If you see the right professionals, they will give you the right advice based on the intent that you have. So, for example, in the Australian market, if I intend to have a business and then want to sell that business within 2 years, arguably one of the easiest ways to do that is to set up a company structure. It's a much easier thing to sell. It's very simple. It's easier to get a bank account. It's easier to go and do a lease with. That is a better vehicle for that kind of transactional nature of buying and selling businesses.
Yep.
Whereas an accountant may go, look, mate, to be honest, you already have a house. We think we should put this in a trust because you're going to own it for the long term. This will give you some level of protection against your assets. That usually gets mitigated by the landlord anyway, because they refuse to not take directors or basically beneficiary guarantees or personal guarantees. But that is a vehicle it is more cumbersome when you try to sell the business, but it is a good vehicle for a longer term sort of strategy. So that's why you're defining that and then seeking the right legal and accounting advice up front is really, really important. That will actually set up you to have less pain in the future. Because if you get that wrong and then want to do something different in the future, it may, instead of costing you 8 or 10 grand to set up in the first place, it may cost you 20 or 30 or 40 grand to unwind.
Yeah, wow.
And then set something up. That's a huge cost once you've got cash flow pressures. It's not like you've got your capital reserve at the beginning, where you've got effectively lots of money in your cash flow. Once you're operating, that could be up and down all over the place, and taking $40,000 out at a future date is much harder to do. So that's probably the first and the best step is we advise the clients to go and seek professional advice. The outside of that, though, we do provide a heap of tools like cash flow forecasting tools, like simple weekly sales analysis tools. So how many coffees are going to sell, at how much price, how much food, how many beverages. That then builds in and then actually tells them their break-even number, because you put in your fixed costs and your variable costs. And so again, going back to that break-even or your, what did you call the numbers?
My trigger numbers.
Trigger numbers, yeah. So
yeah.
So just a simple tool, so someone actually knows, this is my number. I need to make more than this per week. Otherwise, I am literally losing money, and it's going from my pocket back into the business, or back into my staff's pockets because you still got to pay your staff.
Yeah, well, over here it's law that you have to have enough money in the bank to pay your staff, otherwise you are operating illegally.
Yeah, it's very similar in most markets. Australia obviously has got very high worker protections. Not as many in the hospitality space, but obviously, minimum wage is very high and all that sort of stuff. So, and compulsory superannuation as well, which is, it can actually catch out a lot of employers who don't forecast for that cost. So we provide a lot of those tools.
The thing with trigger numbers as well is, your break-even number is just one trigger number. The other thing is, other kinds of trigger numbers are how much in debt can I get before I am uncomfortably in debt, where it's the point of no return. What does that number look like? And how long do I need to be there where it's touch and go versus it's going to bury me? Because understanding...
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah,
how are you defining debt? Or are you defining liability or are you defining debt?
Liability.
Okay.
It's because, and it's different for everybody, right? So, and there's the important part of that is risk appetite. So some people look at, let's say, $50,000. I can be in debt for $50,000. And if I have to close my business and go and get a job, I know it's going to take me probably 3 or 4 years worth of work, knowing that I could get a salary of, a couple $100,000 a year. It will take me 3 or 4 years to pay that off, and I'll be okay. I'm comfortable with that level of risk. But if I was living in Australia and I opened a cafe, and I know that the fit out for the cafe is going to cost me about $1 million, and then I'm going to operate for 2 more years after I open the cafe and put myself in another couple $100,000 worth of debt. How long is it going to take me to have to, figure a way out of that hole of debt?
Yeah.
Or how far deeper into that hole am I going to need to go before I piece out of that and try and find another buyer?
Yeah.
So it's that kind of an idea, which is directly correlated to risk appetite. I know people like Noah taught me, it just impressed the fuck out of me with his risk appetite. Shout out to Noah from CRS.
Yeah,
he's got some fucking balls, let me tell you.
Yeah. I can't disagree with you there. He's I'm like, okay. Pretty sure we haven't got to the... You're doing it much faster than I would probably do it if it was me. I wouldn't be that comfortable. So
no, and this is what I'm saying about risk appetite. Like I look at somebody like him, and I have a girlfriend in Australia who has as much of a risk appetite as Nawar, but she buys properties and flips them. So she's okay being in massive amounts of debt for 2 or 3 years in a row because she's borrowing upwards of $2 or $3 million at a time.
The liability is very different though. So one, you have an underlying collateral piece or a piece of property, which in the Australian market is rarely lower than the value that you purchased it for.
Right.
So for me, that's a much lower risk strategy than
what Noah's doing. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But at any time the bubble could burst. At any time, let's say she's rebuilding a house and no one wants to buy it. You just never know. And these are, the likelihood of something like that happening is quite small in the Australian property market, for God's sake. It's just ridiculous.
Let's not get me into the economics of the Australian property market, because I'll be here for like hours talking around the systemic way that we fortify our
it's such
property
market. I
swear. We actually literally govern towards holding it there the way it is. But anyway, as a side note,
the coffee market. But you see what I'm saying? Like the way that my thing is, and what I talk to a lot of clients about, as well as what we push a lot through the maps that we're creating for people, is that understanding these trigger numbers that are self-defined. What risk appetite am I comfortable with, and what's the number that I need to be aware of that's going to push me into a different comfort or discomfort zone. you know, so for
What is
example,
your opinion on sorry to cut you off. What is
no,
your
go ahead.
opinion on the lease? So the liability of the lease.
So, I mean, leases are an interesting one. I should preface
Yeah.
this by saying I have a very low risk appetite. I don't, I'm not very good when it comes to carrying debt. I pay everything off. I just don't like the idea of having debt. And lease to me is a similar kind of thing because I'm
Mm-hmm.
commitment phobic, and so,
Yeah.
so the liability of a lease. I look at a lease as an asset most of the time,
Yeah.
based on what portion of the lease or the life cycle of the lease that you're in, and how that correlates to again going back to your philosophy of intention. So if my
Mm-hmm.
intention is to sell this business within a couple of years, I'm going to build a business up to have a long time left on the lease so that the person I'm handing it off to has a lot of equity in that lease.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and something like that holds a lot of value
Yeah.
for the future businesses. But at the same time, and the other way of looking at this is I'm going to build a business, or I'm going to go into business expecting I'm going to be here for 25 years or whatever.
Yep.
And I sign a lease that's 3 by 3 by 3 or 5 by 5 with an option of going another 5, but I'm out of business in 12 months. I'm in some fucking trouble.
Mm-hmm. It's always the catch-22 with leases. I agree with you. So a lease is the most important thing you'll negotiate. I don't care about the fit out costs as much. I don't really mind all those other parts. That comes after. The lease, for me, is basically going to somewhat define whether you go bankrupt, you succeed, or you have something you can sell.
Oh, you could
Um,
make a mint just off your lease. Like your
yep,
business can be going into the ground.
yep.
But if you have prime real estate and somebody wants to come in and shut your fucking cafe down and turn it into an accountant's office because you have prime real estate, you've
And
got
you've
the
negotiated
lease.
a really good lease. Yeah,
Absolutely. You will
yeah.
make a fucking mint just off that.
But on the flip side, as you say, the lease is just the hardest and most fixed liability. Most of the time, you can get into a business with very low personal risk. For
Mm-hmm.
a cafe, for example, someone's like us would 12 months of rent is your total liability.
Say that again,
You may
Kieran.
put in some of your own cash. So with say silver the equipment, so
Mm-hmm.
Silver Chef is then just 12 months of rent, never the full
Mm-hmm.
outlay of the equipment. So cool.
Right.
No personal guarantees. I can give all this back. Try it for a year. You can basically put in maybe some of your own cash, and so your liability is capped on the capital that you've employed.
Right.
Um, and so therefore your loss then is just the return on that capital or the capital itself. And so that may get you into the business, but the lease then is what's going to determine whether or not you're successful or not. And so for example, it doesn't go well and you have to return on the equipment to Silvershare for 12 months, you've lost your $50,000, for example, but then you've still got 6 years left on this lease and the lease is worth $100,000 a year with a 4% increase every year. All of a
Yeah.
sudden you're staring down the barrel of a $660,000 liability,
Right.
which you have personally guaranteed.
That's fucking
At that point,
terrifying.
yeah, at that point, unless you have some property to sell real quick, or
Yeah.
you're making a hell of a lot of money, because you're talking what, like 8 grand a month.
Yeah, shit. That it just
Um,
gives me heart pop. This is how terrible my risk appetite is. Just the
yeah,
thought of being in that situation just gets my heart racing.
we'll go bankrupt. 100%. Or people have to close their businesses.
Yep.
Is literally
Sell their
because
houses, blah, blah, blah.
the landlord is the one that is always going to have the most amount of security, unless you
Yep.
go to a bank and then get like $1 million worth of financing from the bank, and they will have a piece of property securing that. So
What kind of
that's
insurance can
really
you
important.
get in those kinds of things? Like what are the different kinds of insurances that you can get that can cover you on that situation?
Very little, to be honest, because
Mm-hmm.
why would any insurance, like, you could probably get it, but the premiums would be out of control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's just a probability thing, right? Like if the uh, current benchmarks say that 1 in 10 or 6 out of 10 fail within 12 months, no insurance company wants to back that horse, for example. Um, many financiers don't want to back that horse, and as
Yeah.
you can tell, that's why it's so hard to get capital. And
I'll give you an
that's
example. Sorry, go on.
yeah, right. No, you go.
I'll give you an example of what you're talking about in the flip side of that. There's a
Yeah,
cafe in Sydney in Bondi, and we all know, like even
yeah,
people who've
very
never
nice.
been to Sydney know how exclusive Bondi Beach is. So this was a cafe that was doing exceptionally well in Bondi Junction to be exact.
Oh, nice. Yep.
And the landlord was raising the rent because things were up for renewal, was raising the rent in accordance with her revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And he doubled her rent.
Yep. You're successful. I want to be with more money.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone just seems to think that because your revenue is so high, your profits must be just as high, right?
Yeah.
Well, as you know from the work that you've done and from being at the conference, the Map It Forward event that we did in Sydney,
Mm-hmm.
we know that on average, people make about 17 cents per cup of coffee as
Yep.
net profit. And so when you're doubling somebody's rent, there's no room for those kinds of numbers whenever it
You're not
comes to
doubling the
profit.
amount of revenue. No. And typically in a lot of markets, hospitality businesses will run on about a 10% profit margin.
Yeah.
Um, and that's before tax. People always forget about tax. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna lose 21 to 30% out of this. And that's on your best forecast.
Oh,
What's on your
yeah.
pessimistic forecast? Yeah.
That's assuming
Um,
nothing goes wrong. That's assuming that you don't lose any days because of hailstorms that have just recently
yep.
happened in Sydney or flooding that's happening in San
The
Diego right
council,
now.
yeah, the council decides to shut down your street and the footpath
Yeah.
outside of your cafe for whatever reason.
Snow days, like all of that kind of thing that
Yep.
happens, not in Sydney and San Diego, but in, different places
What
around
about
the world.
taking a holiday?
Yeah, no, we're
What about?
business owners, mate. We can't afford holidays. What are you talking about?
I know, I know. It's like, can I shut my cafe at any time? No. If I
Ever.
shut for a week, I go out of business. Yeah. Like forecast for 48 weeks of revenue and
Yeah.
forecast for 60% of what you think. Um, and if you're still making money out of that, then cool. I think you've got a good idea.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, here was the thing where had she have negotiated a longer lease term,
Mm-hmm.
because what happened was she didn't anticipate. She was in first time business owner in a really high rent area. She
Yep.
wanted to try the business out, so she played her luck. She was like, "Well,
Yep.
I'll just try it out. If I happen to survive, I'm going to just extend my lease."
Yep.
She didn't have
And
the right
so
people around her to say, listen, get the lease for as long as you can at the price that you can secure it at. And if
yep.
you don't survive, you can just literally sell the business just based on the lease. You're selling the terms of the lease. That's basically what you're doing.
And even if you don't get a long lease, there's ways to like, and that's why good advice comes in. Like a good
Mm-hmm.
lawyer on your side who helps you with that negotiation up front. Like get them to actually help you do that. Could negotiate ways to get around that the landlord doesn't get to see your revenue. That 4% CPI increase is all they're allowed to do per
Yeah,
year.
wow. What a
That
good
there is a
idea.
fixed percent, or there's a fixed percentage on how much they can increase it on that option period. There's heaps
Mm-hmm.
of like a contract is basically any defined agreement between two parties, right? So if you there's no standard for that. So if you go, Mr. Landlord, I want this, and they go, cool, I want to have only 10% possible increase on my option or a 10% decrease to cap their lower part, and so that you can
Yep.
cap how much more money they make or cap how much more less money they make, and you're accepting of that, and you both agree, then you put that in the contract. Um, a lease, a lot of people always go, oh, I'll just get the standard lease. It's usually like a real estate agent sort of standard lease in Australia. Same with New Zealand. The US is probably a little bit more. But there's definitely never accept the standard. It's a negotiation, and
It's a creative,
it's
it's the creative element of business, right?
remember those intentions you have.
Yeah.
Put that into your lease.
Mm-hmm.
Try and define that. Try and define the relationship that you're going to have with your landlord and your landlord's agent, because the landlord itself can sometimes be reasonable. The landlord's agent can sometimes be the worst person on the planet for you,
Yeah,
because they just see the black and white. So, especially those really big multinational ones where it's just, they literally incentivize their staff to be as hard as possible to the terms of their lease, or try and then get out of the terms of their lease, or circumnavigate. So there's that first negotiation, getting professional advice, getting someone to help you, either an experienced entrepreneur like yourself, Lee, or
Thank
like a
you.
friend within your community, to come in and help you negotiate that lease, as you said, could be the difference between, yes, you may have failed in business, but you're still not going to go belly up because you've got something to sell.
Well, you've got an asset to sell. That's
Yeah.
exactly the
Or
thing.
you've got an option to get out. So, for example, the lease that I had at the cafe in Bowen Hills, one of the beauties of that lease is we negotiated that. So most leases in Australia, for those who don't know, for many years until I think it was about 2015, there was a change to the Retail Tenancy Act. Actually held that business and assigned that.
Kieran, can you say that again? I've just lost you a little bit. There's that awesome Australian Wi-Fi situation going on there.
Sorry.
No worries.
So within my lease at Bowen Hills, for those who don't know, in Australia, until about 2015, I think it was, if you had a lease and you assigned that lease, your actual personal guarantees would persist, irrespective of if they sold that business or then the next person. So
What does
I
that
actually saw
mean?
this with so that means, so for a really good example, there's a business in downtown in Brisbane here. I actually looked at buying the place. It was going to cost me 16 grand. Walk in, walk out, everything's still there, all inclusive, because all they had was just basically the lease, and all the equipment was for 16,000. Buy the whole
Yeah,
lot. Wow. But I'd seen 3 people go through this place, and unfortunately, the first person who sold the lease for 10 years was still on the hook personally.
Wow.
For that lease, and so was the second person, so was the third person. So that's
Yeah,
how they used to
wow.
work. Is that it would actually the landlord then, great, I'll have as many people go bust in this place as possible because I've got as many people I can collect from. That's kind of how it used to work. There was a change to the Retail Tenancy Act for that to not be standard, but now landlords just write it into a contract or write it into a lease. And so with mine over at Bowen Hills, that was one of the best things that we did, was we negotiated that out. So when we sold the business, our personal liabilities ended as on that assignment.
But you've got to know to do that, right? And the
100%.
best, unless if you don't know all of that stuff, your advice of like spend the money on getting the right advice from the right people.
Yep.
Is just
and
eat brown rice for 6 months.
Yeah.
You're better off doing that than risking your own sanity.
If you're not doing your budget with $15,000 for legals and for accounting costs up front, you're setting yourself up for failure. At least $8,000 on the cheap side of things.
Yeah.
But remember, you're not going to find the perfect location with the perfect landlord first. You're probably going to have to do it a couple of times. So every time you get a lease review, it's going to probably cost you $2,500.
Yeah.
From a decent lawyer. So that's probably, having those costs and being comfortable that spending that money isn't throwing good money away for the sake of it. It's a lesson every time you do it. And so if you find the most perfect site, but the landlord is just a pain in the butt to work with, will not negotiate or budge on terms, that's probably a good sign to say that's probably not a good site.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to send you belly up.
A friend of mine has just recently started using a broker. So before that, he was finding the sites, he was opening cafes and roasteries in himself, and just switched over to finding a broker, and swears he will never not use a broker again, because the broker has been the person who has sat down with him and said, what do you actually want from a landlord? What do you need? Turnkey.
Yeah.
and he's gone in there and negotiated all of that for him. And it's been a dream for him. It's cost him more money with regards to the amount that he has to pay a little bit extra with regards to the lease, but saved him money on the back end of potential fuck ups. That's going to end up
Finding
happening.
those, be it a broker, be it a business broker, be it a just a property buyer. Like there's plenty of professionals out there. It comes down to trust, vetting them, going through your networks, asking for who are your previous clients? Can I have a chat to them? Who are your current clients? Can I have a chat to them? Vet people.
This is where business
around.
relationships come in so handy.
It's like hiring someone without actually checking their references.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that happens too fucking
why would you do that
too,
for your
doesn't
professional
it?
services? yeah, I know. It's the I know it sounds like common sense, but we all forget to do it. So, so that if you find those, great entrepreneur once told me, find a network or basically a group of people that you trust, that are experts in what they do, and you can leverage off them, and they can leverage off what you're an expert in, and build that little posse of people and that network, and that so when you do have something that pops up, you have someone you can reach out to, and it might just be a sanity check. It could be just a purely a validation. But it's really, really powerful. Like, I'm sure you've done it, Lee, as well, when it's like, am I getting ripped off here? Is this too expensive? And you reach out and say, hey, does this sound about right? They're like, oh no, that's actually a little bit over. Or it's like, actually no, that's a really good price. And so that can help you make decisions much faster.
And it's invaluable having people that you can call and say, hey, Kieran, so I'm thinking of selling this and this person wants to buy it. Am I getting ripped off? Or I'm looking at getting into this lease. Am I getting ripped off? And just having a friend that'll say, I don't know 100%, but this doesn't sound right. Or no, you're absolutely getting ripped off. Go give it to your lawyer and get them to take a look at it. And building these relationships takes years, but it should take you years, because you should be meeting a bunch of people during your journey that teach you how to do that, right?
Or find someone who's very well connected, right? And that's so essentially, I have a team of basically coffee channel managers throughout Australia, and one of their remits is to basically, I want them, into layman terms, I want them to be the guy who's got a guy for that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, that's why people hire me, because you've
got all the people, right?
Absolutely.
So, your network. You want to tap into your network, which you've thoroughly vetted. You actually happy to recommend, and that's why that they want to obviously work with you. That cuts out all the hard effort and the heartache of sometimes trying to vet these people. And so that's really important, is to build your own network, but also find someone who has an established network that you trust and that they trust down the line, and then leverage that.
Yeah. So I have this kind of philosophy that I'd love to see what you think of it. I encourage people who are opening a business for the first time to bootstrap as much of it as they can. And
to what, sorry?
To bootstrap. So struggle as much as you can in the beginning. And even if you have the money, try not to spend it except on essential things. Now, my reason for saying this is because it forces you to learn the shit sooner rather than later than you have to learn.
Yep.
What's your thoughts on that?
I'd probably refine it slightly.
Okay.
Not necessarily struggle. I like that you put in, don't spend the money if you've got it, but more learn to live with less. So be comfortable. The minimum, understand what the minimum you can survive on as a business and as a human being, and still be comfortable. And that's your baseline. That's your, you then understand what is the bottom from that. So you understand what your bottom is, and then put 20% on that, and that becomes your threshold. And so that's your lead indicator for problems. And that's also the way that you vet anything. So unless it meets that minimum threshold of your bottom plus 20, then it's probably not a good idea. That's probably just an easy way to explain that. But otherwise, I totally agree. It's if you can learn to do things yourself, one, you'll be a more rounded individual, but two, you'll save yourself some money and some heartache, but also, you just probably be a bit more of an all-round entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so my only one that I'm going to say there is, and most people don't do this, if you haven't already and you haven't owned a business and you're going to use either QuickBooks or Xero or whatever other platform, go out and do a 2-day course or a 1-day course on how
Yeah.
to use the thing. Simple as that. At least then you'll set it up properly and you won't cost yourself, either huge amounts of accounting bills or have to redo it again and then cost you huge
Yep.
amounts of consulting bills.
Yeah.
So just go and do a course, learn how to do some bookkeeping.
There's
Once,
loads of free online,
yeah,
like 50
yeah,
part tutorials on how to use QuickBooks. It's
yeah,
really fantastic for that kind of stuff.
yeah,
The idea of bootstrapping stuff is I really believe that business is going to teach you everything you never wanted to know about yourself.
yep. I totally agree. Yeah,
And
you learn
and
more
I
about
think that
yourself than anything else.
it's a great thing. I see
Yep.
business as like a vision quest.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a deep dive into all the dark parts of yourself and what kinds of struggle you can deal with and how much patience you have and
Mm-hmm.
what kind of tolerance you have, how open-minded you are or you aren't.
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things. What's your capacity for risk? What's your capacity for growth?
Mm-hmm.
All of these kinds of things that many people don't tend to test and push the limits of themselves. And so
Yep.
if you're going to go into business, you want to learn those things as quickly as possible and identify where what I call your pain points are. A lot of this stuff is
Yeah.
in the book that I'm writing, the very first book. Can you believe I'm writing a book?
I can't. To be honest, I can't believe it's your first book.
Thank
I
you.
thought you would have. Thought you had like 5 by now.
Yeah, I'm in the process of writing the first map book and this
Yeah.
one's for production roasters and owners of roasting businesses. But we're
Nice.
talking a lot about this, the idea of getting to know what your pain points are as
Mm-hmm.
quickly as possible, because the
Yep.
sooner you get to know what your pain points are, the quicker you can go out there and reach out to people or find resources online that can
Mm-hmm.
teach you how to become more familiar with the problem solving strategies of
Yep.
addressing the pain points that you're coming up against. So,
Yep.
and a couple of examples of pain points is risk appetite or finding financial solutions or
Mm-hmm.
communicating with staff or finding a lease or dealing with difficult customers, dealing with sexual harassment issues, etc., etc., etc. These are all pain points. Some people suck at communication, other people are amazing at it. And for those who are amazing at it, it's not a pain point. But for an introvert who hates being around people, if you're going to own a cafe, communication is going to be a pain point that is going to hit you very fucking quickly.
Even extroverts suck at communication. To be honest, they just because it's not just about communication; it's effective communication.
Right. And we talk a lot about
How?
that in the first book.
Yeah.
This idea of like the
Yeah.
soft skills, right? And
Yeah.
and how to address it. And we give some resources that are outside of Map It Forward because conspiring to
Mm-hmm.
each other's success, etc., etc.
Yeah.
These are pain points that are really important to address as quickly as possible as a business owner, because if you're going to just ignore them, they're going to bury you as quickly as not having enough money is.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think something we always forget as entrepreneurs or as business owners, or actually potential business owners,
Yeah.
those who've transitioned from a corporate where they're running a business, but it's actually not their personal liability, and they've got
Mm-hmm.
a heap of staff that do things magically in the background. Transitioning to being a small business owner or a business owner, and then no, the buck stops with you, so you have to do everything. If you want something to be done and you can't afford to pay someone to do it, you have to be able to do it yourself.
Which includes cleaning the
That's
toilets, which includes
yeah,
unclogging drains, which includes taking
that's a
the trash out.
huge, yeah, that's a huge culture shock for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and one that they aren't comfortable with or can't deal with, or they don't understand the toll that they may take on their emotional or psychological well-being. And I think that's the roller coaster of being in business can take its toll on people. And some people deal with that better than others, or some people just don't have a strategy or get caught unawares about that. And so that can then sink them, and they, put their head in the sand, and all of a sudden, a business could be. Sorry, 2 seconds.
No worries. I'm assuming there's a battery issue there.
Oh, no. Let's put you on, my headphones.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is where I want to talk about mental health, because as a business owner, if you haven't prepared for this moment and the stress that comes with owning a business, and you aren't aware that being in business is going to teach you everything you never wanted to know about yourself, the mental health issues that come with that can be debilitating for you and for the people around you. And you as the president, go ahead.
They can persist for a long time, right? So.
Oh yeah.
You go.
And you as the president of ASCA being the Australian Specialty Coffee Association, I want to talk to you a little bit about, where is, just from the people that we spoke to at the 2 events, the 2 3-day events we ran, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne, easily the number one thing, and you were there for both of those, easily the most popular topics that people gravitated towards were the topics where we were talking about mental health and assertiveness.
Yep.
It seems to be a real problem in our industry. And I want to talk to you about that a little bit more.
Totally. It's one of those things where, and probably to break this down a little bit, I find it really weird that one of the largest employment sectors of any nation is small business, but also hospitality. And especially in Australia, which is heavily unionized in most areas of workers. Hospitality isn't, and there's no centralized repository of support or places they can go and get information. And I think a lot of that's come around the fact that most hospitality industry or businesses are seen as transient, and so that people don't find this as a career. And obviously that's, not a correct statement. There's plenty
which is ridiculous at 25 to $30 an hour for a barista, that it's seen as a transient.
You can buy a house on that.
You honestly, really can.
My head barista was, she had a house just down the road from my place. So
perhaps not in Bondi Beach, but you still can buy a house as a barista on 25 to $30 an hour.
Yeah, it's it obviously spending within your own means is always the way to do that. So it's interesting from that side that there isn't anything, right? So from an ASCA point of view, it was always seen a bit like the SCAs around, the specialty scene, the very pointy end of the spear, the top end of the market. And I think over the next, year or so, and hopefully into the future, we can transition that to being more, let's be the absolute pinnacle of excellence, but let's help everybody get to that excellence. And that's not just in coffee preparation or, how to best roast and all that sort of stuff. That's got to be more holistic than that. And so we're just starting the paths of connecting with people like Demelza from Same Cup. With a charity organisation, or it's a pseudo-government entity down in Victoria that's basically has many good policies around sexual discrimination, harassment, all that sort of stuff. They actually have really well written, good template sort of documents and policy documents.
Is that the organisation that we connected you with through the events in Melbourne?
Through that
Great.
Board. Yep.
I'm glad that's going ahead, that relationship, because shout out to Gabriel and his girlfriend, because Gabriel was at our Melbourne event and he was the one that suggested that.
It's really slow steps. Bit more bureaucracy in that sort of larger pseudo-government area. But either way, we'll get access to our members, at least put it front and center.
so that they have access to these resources. And so just starting to build on those things and at least have a central repository for information is great. The other one is probably the next one off the next cab off the rank, so to speak, is Beyond Blue, which is around depression and obviously mental well-being. And they've got some great tools around how to self, but then also to how to find professionals or how to identify people within your own network that can help you with those issues. And to be honest, the professional route's not always appropriate or available to everybody, but there's usually someone, once you know who to identify in your own network, that can actually help you with those issues. And it's about having the confidence and it to want to identify, but then to approach that person and seek that help, which is quite important. So
I agree.
And unfortunately, sorry, keep going.
No, please go ahead. Unfortunately,
I was just saying, unfortunately, from an ASCA point of view, it's a small non-profit, purely volunteer, unlike the SCA with huge resources. It's still very much volunteer driven. So on that basis, we then have to get smart, right? It's like running your own business.
Yeah.
You've got limited resources. You've got, mainly human capital time. So you need to leverage other experts, find their information, and then leverage that to provide the benefit you're trying to seek to do for your client. In this case, our members, or in the case of a small business, how do you best find the resources to reduce your cost structures to make it so that you have a viable business?
Yeah. And for anyone who did attend Sydney or Melbourne and was looking forward to hearing Dr. Jamie Berry talk in Melbourne, the reason that it couldn't go ahead was purely financial from an ASCA perspective. And
in time, yeah.
And it's one of those things that we're committed to making it happen at some point. Hopefully we will be back this year. Nawaz adamant that the next conference is happening this year and Jamie will be a part of that. It was just so ridiculously inspiring to see how much people took from 2 hours worth of assertiveness training and still are contacting us about how valuable that was.
I think obviously I think the concept we had for MICE was probably just a little bit too soon for a new venue change as well, which then obviously escalated our cost structures.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's are you there, Kieran?
Yeah, sorry, I just had a
phone
call come through. It's one of those things where I think if we, got a bit smarter and we found a different way to deliver the same content, feel like you do through the your webinars and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely ways to get it up and running. The physical training sessions, finding that balance between cost and benefit and having the most amount of people be able to attend and get benefit is the trickiest part. And obviously, understand that as well from running Map It Forward. That's always the tricky part. So.
Yeah. And look, we're committed to doing it. It's just we couldn't get it done in time for MICE, but we absolutely are going to make sure, and Jamie and I committed to bringing that to everyone in a way that works. Hopefully we can get ASCA involved so that we can get it out there to more people. And you and I are working hard to make that happen as well. Whether it's something that happens this year, with one of the events that's going on that ASCA is running, or whether we just tie it to the Map It Forward conference and find a way to make that happen. Or the other alternative is that we run a standalone online event that, we can give access to everyone in the world to, because, something interesting that's happening at the moment. We have put out a survey for roasters in the research that I'm doing for the book. And in it, we've asked a bunch of questions. And they're questions around mental health. There are questions around sexual harassment and They're not about roasting, and this is purely targeted at roasters. A couple of things have shocked the shit out of me. So in the survey, we do ask people what gender they identify with. We ask them what country they're working in. We ask them, have they experienced sexual harassment? We ask them, would they know what to do if they witnessed sexual harassment, even if it wasn't happening to them. We ask them if their job positively or negatively affects their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
We ask them if they're doing what their ideal job would be. Like, these are the kinds of things that we're asking in this survey. The number of people who have commented to us saying, when we ask them, what professional training do you feel is missing from your toolkit? About 80% of people, unprompted, have said that they need assertiveness training.
Yeah, it's to be honest, the easiest way for someone to understand how powerful that training is just listen to Jamie explain what assertiveness is.
Wasn't that fucking great?
But yeah,
that seesaw.
I don't want to steal his thunder. Yeah.
Honestly, that talk was like, I've known Jamie since I was 10, right? He's my best friend. He's my favorite person to have conversations with. And he said to me, Lee, what the fuck does the coffee industry want to hear from me about? When I thought I've learned as much as I could learn from Jamie, and I'm constantly shocked by how much I learned from him. When he put that slide up and he started describing assertiveness to us and what it means and how you can see it in yourself and improve the way that you communicate, and identify your style and identify other people's styles, etc., etc., etc. I said to him, you are going to be the most loved person in the global coffee industry once I have put you in front of everybody, because this is the thing that every human in the coffee industry, let alone the whole world, everybody needs to know this. This is the silver bullet for our industry with the amount of mental health issues that we have.
I totally agree. And for me, actually, it was I find it most powerful for younger women or any woman as well, within a male-dominated industry, because a lot of women entrepreneurs or successful ladies or driven ladies will be accused of being aggressive.
Holla.
Yeah.
I'm not aggressive.
Whereas it may be aggressive in the way that it's coming across, but that's not the intent. And the beauty of what he explained and the way that he explained, because it was very, very well done in layman's terms, and it's just so succinct. And I was like, oh, actually, that makes sense. And so I think a lot of the ladies in that room, when that was delivered, they had a lot of self-reflection that time and allowed them to have some self-reflection and go, oh, okay, actually, you know what, I actually was being aggressive. I wasn't trying to be, but that I can understand how that would come across. Yeah. And if I had to change 3 bits of language, it would have come across as being assertive, and I probably would have got a different result. And so I thought it was brilliant from that perspective. From a male's perspective, especially in this industry, understanding the nuances and the difference between the two, but also not being aggressive and actually being assertive is a much more powerful way to communicate. And I think that allowed a lot of self-reflection in that room as well for the males in the room around either how they were accepting someone else's communication or how they were communicating themselves as well. So it was a really interesting session. I obviously enjoyed it immensely, but yeah.
It was hands down from the survey responses that we received. It was hands down the favorite session of all 3 days.
Yeah. It's something we do need to get up and running, but I think we're probably going to have to leverage some technology at some point to get it done.
I agree. So, I absolutely agree.
And get it to the masses. Having said that, I am working on an education sponsor, so I'll keep you informed.
Please do. I'm hoping that into the future, Map It Forward is somebody that can be an education sponsor for places like ASCA and SCA and things like that. We want to be able to offer, those kinds of programs for members of these associations, so that people don't feel that they're left out in the lurch.
Or delivery of content, not necessarily a sponsor. So like
Yes.
there's a difference there, right? Like you can be a content provider and an absolute expert, deliver that for and on behalf of associations,
Yes.
like even around the world. Sorry, I'm just trying to charge
No
my
problem.
phone.
And you know, that's what we're intent on doing. So you know, we just confirmed today that we're going to be having a time management specialist coming on the podcast and talking about that. We're going to have somebody that's going to talk about teamwork and team building coming on the podcast, and tapping into the resources of the skill sets that are severely lacking in expertise in our industry. And we want to become, and we are, that's the idea of becoming the expert on professionalism in the global coffee industry. And, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have the corporate background to understand where that's lacking in our industry, and having done associate diplomas in counseling and degrees and blah, 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 run my own businesses and whatnot. I'm in the fortunate position where I understand the pieces of information that need to come together to be able to make that happen. And then just being able to provide that as a, not necessarily just as a one-stop shop or a plug-in kind of solution to that, but kind of sort of that, so that people are coming to us and saying, like people like Asker can come to us and say, listen, we need to have a course that's run on professionalism, and how does that work? You know, we've got, we've not spoken about this yet, but I guess this is as good as a place to announce this as anywhere. We're going to be launching a new blog this year, and it's going to be on the fundamentals of professionalism. So we are going to talk about how to write an email. We're going to talk about things like how to make a professional introduction. We are going to talk about how to apply for a job, how to resign from a job. These are the kinds of things that, because the barrier to entry for our industry is so low, we're making the assumption that these kids, particularly as they come into our industry, understand how to do this stuff.
Oh, it's not just kids. There's plenty of older adults who still don't know how to write an email or how to act professionally at work. We're all guilty of not taking the high road or being professional at times, but there's plenty that just it doesn't. It's not within their spectrum of actually knowing. So it's the unknown for them.
Right.
It's fantastic, because that doesn't translate just to coffee. That could translate to every aspect of life. So
right.
Yeah, it'd be very cool.
So that's something that's going to start as of February. We're in the process of writing those blogs now, and we are inviting people who want to be writers for Map It Forward as we expand the blogs. So there's going to be a blog for professionalism, a blog for roasting, a blog for finance, a blog for all of these kinds of things. There's going to be separate blogs for these specific sectors. And so that you can decide that you want to go in and read all about professionalism, you hit on the professionalism blog. There's a blog for wanting to know about finance. We're going to have, you know, a portal into that. So and Kieran, I will be hitting you up to write at least one article for that, just so that you know.
Yeah.
This is just where I lay that in your lap.
It's always one of those things where they go, can you write this? And you go, I can, but I'm not sure everybody wants to read about like return on capital employed. And
you'd be surprised. Like, you know, so we want to start off with things like, what are the 3 most important financial statements that you need to understand about your business, so that you know what financial health looks like in your business. You know, learning how to read a P&L, your balance sheet, and like, what else do you need to know about your business so that you know what your position is? Like, that's a great starting point. And so having those kinds of articles in there, as well as, you know, a capital return report, all these kinds of things are for the more advanced entrepreneur or business owner. But there's all of that's necessary, so that people can delve into a portal of, you know, finance in the hospitality industry and read a whole bunch of stuff. And let's say they start reading a report that you're writing or a blog post that you've written. They're like, this is way over my head. I need to find something that helps me understand the more simple stuff about bookkeeping and whatnot. But there are people who... Go on.
Yeah, so one of those things where, and I think you do this quite well, and Jamie especially did this really well, the more simply you can explain a very complicated topic, the more you actually understand it. So, yeah, I'd say that if someone's not understanding what you're laying down in those higher end or like, you know, maybe more niche or granular kind of topics, then probably haven't written it properly.
Right.
So maybe that's just a way to vet them. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree.
I understand what they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so let's talk about you being ASCA president, because that's been coming close to 6 months, sort of ish.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, should be about 6 months now.
Soon, yeah, September, a couple months. How has it been being ASCA president?
Not that different from when I was vice president. Mainly because and I'm not sure how many people know this, but at not the last AGM, but the AGM prior, Brent, the old president, did have a desire to step down. And under our constitution, you need to have an existing office bearer stand up to the next position to be president. And I didn't necessarily think I was ready for that, and to be honest, I didn't really want to do it at the time.
I can't imagine why. No responsibility or anything involved in that. You've got loads of time to spare doing this shit, right?
Yeah, to be honest, the VP role is actually the one of the suckier ones. Well, it was just because you do a lot of the doing. But yeah, so I actually asked him to, like, so, mate, look, would you mind? I'll do the heavy lifting. Behind the scenes, all the negotiations for sponsorship agreements, all that sort of stuff, and if you can stay on and just be the figurehead and promote the association. And he was kind enough to agree to that for another year, even though it was probably at the end of his tether. He'd been president for a long time and mourned the bumps and bruises throughout that period, as you do. And I was obviously very grateful for him to do that, and then so. Realistically, the transition from when I came into the president's role wasn't as big as it could have been, because essentially I was doing the role just without the FaceTime and without the public sort of profile, which, to be honest, I probably prefer. But yeah,
you could never be accused of being a narcissist ever.
Yeah.
I mean, of all the people I know in the coffee industry, you were the last one that I would expect that would ever step up and say, "Can I have the limelight, please?"
Yeah. To be honest, I'm sure my wife would disagree in some ways as well. But in this particular space, I think being an enabler of other people's success is the true power, and that's really what I want to do, and that's what I do from a Silver Chef perspective. It's what I have great passion for. So being able to be on someone else's journey and help them achieve those things, I get immense satisfaction out of. And whenever I hear of an entrepreneur succeeding with or without my help, I think it's always a point to celebrate. So I take the same philosophy with the ASCA sort of stuff. How do we get the association to be an enabler of success, both personally and in business? And so we've taken steps to do that, right from the simple things that we're just signing on and setting up a new member benefits program to allow individuals and businesses to have a clearly defined financial return from their membership, so that in the way of discounts and buying. We're just about to sign on for one of our insurance brokers, actually my insurance broker, who I've had 3 claims through, and he's handled immensely. So I've got no problems recommending him. He's going to come on board and provide discounts to our members. And so there's clearly defined financial benefits as a business and as a consumer. But then also, as we were talking about, going down that path of support. So if we can't create the content ourselves or be the expert, how do we find those experts and recommend them to our members? And that in that sense, it's Beyond Blue, like, Same Cup, yourself, like Jamie, like, how do we find experts and get that information that is desperately needed to our members, both in a business and an individual's case. And then at the same time, fulfilling the remit that is the Australian Specialty Coffee Association,
Yep.
and that is to promote the excellence and the innovation and development of our coffee industry here in Australia, and promote that to the world. And the vehicle we use to do that is the national and WCE sort of competitions, be it from barista through to brewers to
Cup
roasters,
tasters and all of it.
Yeah, cup tasters,
latte art,
and then coffee and good spirits, and then even our homegrown event, which is Coffee Chain. So our Coffee Chain Challenge, and improving the quality of coffee in that market to allow our roasting members to be able to sell better quality and more coffee to a significant portion of the hospitality market as well. And not getting stuck in the elitism sort of side of things, but trying to improve the whole. And so that's kind of the journey we're on at the moment. And I think the current boards, which it's an amazing position to be in, the full board. We actually have president, VP, past president, treasurer, secretary, 2 ordinary members, and head of baristas and head of roasters guild. So a full board for the first time since I've been involved, which is really cool.
Tell me why it hasn't been like that in the past.
To be honest, I'd be guessing, but I know people have come on and off the board at certain times. Some for potentially slightly just selfish reasons, and self-promotion or self. There's a actual benefit to them, and then there's been plenty of people who've come on purely for the betterment of all, and they've done it out of the pure love of the industry and the pure love of ASCA and what it stands for, and then everything in between. But when they jump on, a lot of people don't understand quite well enough how much personal time you're going to donate without any kind of there's no remuneration, there's no benefit to you outside of doing something for the greater good, or potentially building out your own professional work, or just your own profile. That's really the only benefit you'll get as an individual, and it will take a hell of a lot of effort, and it'll take a hell of a lot of time. But also then all the things that you may be used to having within a larger business or your own business, you don't have access to. So you don't have the financial capabilities to go out, and then how am I meant to do things? It's like, well, you need to go out and get that money, and well, I don't want to do that, and that does. I think that's played a part over the years, and fortunately, when I joined the board, there was obviously some structural issues and some financial issues that have been around in various forms over the last 15 years. But then we got to a place that ASCA is in a financially viable position, and not just for now, but in the future, which has allowed us to reinvest and to invest in more and continue to invest in our people and also our processes and our competitions and the things that we do, which purely by that investment and seeing that from the outside, and then understanding as a member that you do have access to the financials, going to the SGM or the AGM, and understanding that we actually have money in the bank. And that's a different kettle of fish that attracts more people to it. And I think that's been the escalation and people wanting to join the board. Whereas we used to basically just get nominations would be the people who are already sitting there.
Yeah.
And now it's we actually had people, multiple nominations for multiple positions, which is the first time I'd seen it. And it was really a validation of all the hard work from the people who'd come before me. And I think I gave them a shout out last time, but Andrew Kremer, Jeremy Regan and Brent Williams did a heck of a job getting it to where I've sort of taken the torch and continued on that path. And with the current board, Bruno, Mel, Chris, Dave, Nick, and Michaela, like there's and Cam Ballard, there's a huge amount of not just coffee experience, but also business experience, and a diversified panel of people to hopefully continue on that pathway and continue to grow it. So I'm really excited.
Tell me, who are the kind of people that are represented on the board? The reason I ask this is because you attended both Sydney and Melbourne, pretty much the 3 days of talks for all of them. And particularly in Melbourne, we ended up pulling you up on the stage because there was a question from people not realizing that the president of ASCA was in the room, because I know you didn't want the attention. And I thought it would be a really great opportunity for you as the president of ASCA to hear what was going on and the kinds of questions that were being asked throughout the 3 days, and hopefully help you get a more well-rounded understanding of where the community's at. And then like, it was almost on cue that somebody turned around and said, can somebody tell me what ASCA does? And that was the question. And I said, well, actually, given that it was the end of it, the president of ASCA is here. Why don't we just get Kieran to come up on the stage and answer a few questions? And you graciously did. So my question, going back to that, like, who are represented on the board? Is it the bigger companies? Is it the little barista? Is it the small businesses? Who are represented, and how are their interests represented?
The composition at the moment it is actually very diversified. So obviously I'm a finance corporate side of things, but I've also been a small business owner, and I've had my own cafe. And I actually had my cafe while being on the board of ASCA. You've then got, Nick and Dave, both from FDA Specialty Coffee, which is a green bean importer. So you get the green bean side of things as well. And obviously that resonates with a lot of our members who are, Cafe Imports, Bennett's, all those kind of guys who are green bean importers. Yeah. Some of them are small businesses as well. Like, the smaller guys who import maybe only a container or two a year.
Okay.
Like the everything in between, all the way up to your coffee comms and stuff. And then you get so our treasurer is actually an accountant. He specializes in hospitality, and I actually met him. He's my accountant, a mutual friend who was a coffee roaster. And he said, look, hey, he gets it. He understands hospitality. Like, it's more of it's a better conversation to have with an accountant who has some experience in hospitality. It's really powerful. So when we asked him to come on as treasurer, he was quite graciously accepted. We then have Michaela, who's obviously the head coffee trainer for one of our bigger specialty coffee companies here in Australia, Veneziano. So great experience. Ran the Queensland Guild for many years. It's basically her bread and butter. So she's the head of the Barista Guild. Cam Ballard from Coffee World in Adelaide. He's he's a new roaster, but has been supplying coffee and been in the industry for many years. To be honest, without him, our Western competition, so South Australia and WA, Western Australia wouldn't run without him and donating his time over the many years. And so he's come on as the Roasters Guild, and he's literally yesterday just had a brand new baby boy.
Congratulations!
And he's still putting in the big effort to try and make our roasting competition actually run at MICE with a shorter time frame, a heap of new rule changes, compliance issues, and putting in immense sort of effort there. We also have Bruno, who's actually one of our only life members, who's dedicated such time, and he's our head judge here in Australia. He's our link between us and the competitions committee, which is the committee that helps us design and run all of our competitions. He's also on the board now as an ordinary member, and we then also have Mel Kaya, who's again a coffee trainer, works within William Anglis, the TAFE system down in Melbourne, and comes with a wealth of knowledge, and also is one of our head judges across the country as well. So yeah, it's a diversified group of people, but I think it's one that probably has got a decent balance to it.
Sounds a little male heavy for balance.
Yeah, look, to be honest, and that for me, and unfortunately with the democratic process, that's the way that the cookie will crumble sometimes. Nominated there, and then that's what happens. The only ones that, so within our constitution, the only systemic issues that can be brought around the balance is you have to be an ordinary member or one of the head of the barista or roasters guild before you can be an office member.
Okay.
And before you can be president, just to get continuity within the board, to protect our sponsors and our members from any risk from continuity issues. Basically, if you get a brand new board and everything changes overnight, that can impact many of our sponsors financially. It can also, which then impacts our members and the ability to deliver things. So, unfortunately, I'd love, say, I'm going to point out to Lauren at Cafe Imports.
Shout out to Lauren. She's a fucking badass. I love her.
Yeah. If she wants to nominate, I'd probably throw my vote her way as well. And I think there's definitely a need probably it's not quite balanced maybe, but I think there's definitely it's not bad for what it is.
Well, the other thing that I'd like to see happen is like a more of, I guess, and look, I don't know anyone on the board other than you. So I may be speaking out of term here, but given that I would like to see the board reflect the cultural diversity shift that we're experiencing, particularly in the Australian coffee industry. It's tilting so heavily towards an Asian presence in the Australian coffee industry, which didn't exist 5 years ago, and it is now very much present in the Australian coffee industry. And I would hope that the board of ASGA would hopefully start to reflect some of that over the next couple of years.
Yeah. So my comment to that, yeah, and as I said, look, there's two things to that, right? So the first one being, to be on the board, you have to be a member.
Yes.
And so immediately you're limited by the amount of people that you have as members who can be nominated. So the first thing to do there is to grow the value proposition
to the
potential members.
Yep.
To current members, but also to attract new members.
Yeah.
As you attract new members, you'll get a more diversified group of people. And as that grows, you'll have more people who will nominate and more people who you can get from the pool. Like, there's a bigger pool of people with more diverse backgrounds, experiences, and that will grow the talent that can be available to the board to represent the other members. And so I totally foresee at some point, if you just look at the Sydney market, for example, if they all wanted to band together and become members and get one of their community voted into the board, that wouldn't be all that hard. And that's the beauty of it, right? Is we need fresh ideas. We need to get good representation of every background, of every religion, of every race and gender and position to allow to have a robust discussion around the way that you make decisions and the way that you set up a business or you set up a membership base like ASGA.
And just for anyone that's listening, the reason that that's important is because the people on the board get to decide where the money gets spent. They get to decide. They get to decide what education programs get brought in. They get to decide things like, what competitions are going to be run where and how they're going to be run and how they're going to be staffed and who the sponsors are and who the sponsors are not and things like that. So if it's important that if you feel that things aren't being run fairly, this is not just in Australia, this is everywhere. Like the clusterfuck of conversations that I'm hearing going on about SCA, and the decision-making that SCA is making is quite disturbing, to be honest, especially from people who are like, I'm happy to have commentary, but oh, fuck no, I don't want to be involved in being a member or being on the board. Well, then sit down and shut the fuck up if you're not prepared to invest the time that's required to make these organizations run. because like I was speaking with Emma Oak on the podcast the other day, you know, she is a part of ASCA and she gives a lot of her time to running the Sydney Originals.
Yeah.
And
her and Jono, without those two, basically there wouldn't be a central region competition, essentially. Yeah.
And so, you know, she's got a kid. She's got a business. You know, she's part owner in Sensory Lab St. Ali. And she has to give of her own time to be able to do that. So, you know, people who want to start having conversations around cultural diversity and have money contributed to those programs, the best way to do that is to become a part of the decision-making body that determines those things. And you know, I keep hearing people are a bunch of fucking white people making the decisions. That doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't have to be like that. Get involved, figure out how to get it done, contact Kieran. He's not at all difficult to get in contact with, or find somebody else on the board and ask them those questions. If you don't know, just fucking contact me. Yeah,
look, to be honest, my only comment to that is that, yeah, exactly that. You should always ask. Reach out. Like, I'm usually an open book. To be honest, I don't really have the time or the patience to tiptoe through the tulips with I just couldn't
imagine you doing that anyway, mate.
Yeah, so it's like most of my negotiations as far as the sponsorships go. It's like, I think this is a good commercial fit. This is what I think it is. To be honest, it's either like we can tweak it, but like it's not like a long negotiated protraction sort of deal.
Well, it certainly didn't go like that with us for Map It Forward in Sydney with Silver Chef, did it? It was an exchange of 2 emails, and it was pretty much sorted, even though it didn't quite align first of all. But we fixed it very quickly. Like, you're not a man who minces his words.
No, and to be honest, it took 2 emails because I didn't actually know who you were at the time.
So you tested me. I loved when you came back and said that to me.
To see what kind of person you were.
I hope you were.
I got a fairly abrupt and cool response in return. So sort of
you were like, okay, I'm not going to fuck with this woman.
Yeah, she's got some principles and some integrity. I like it. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I try to have those things.
Yeah, it's like anything, right? Like if someone's asking you for money as a sponsor, you need to know if that person is going to sell the same thing as anybody, or is it done on a basis of principle and an ethical position or a place of integrity. So,
well, you know, it's pretty much front and center of who I am. So, and I make no.
Yeah, I do know that now. So, but yeah, like, so from a, I totally agree. If the easiest thing I can say is, one, become a member. That value proposition for your, $45 for a guild membership, $90 for a barista membership per year, $200 for a small business, $400 for medium, $800 for a large. When you can put that in comparison with even the New Zealand Specialty Coffee Association, that's more expensive. SCA is well and truly more expensive than that. It's $200 for an individual. We are working on the member benefit side of things to make sure that you have a clear financial return on that money outlaid beyond the networking, the social aspect, the professionalism, or all the other bits that go with it. We are working on the financial side as well, and the clearly defined benefits of being a member. But also, if you want to, become a member, but if you want to control or be a part of the vision of the future and what this industry looks like in 5 or 10 years time, then by all means get involved, become one of our volunteers, go through our judging pathways to start judging a coffee chain challenge, and then into our regionals, into our nationals. That in itself will give you huge breadths of networks and skills and experience, but then that will then lead into maybe being on our competitions committee, one of our other subcommittees, education in the future. You can actually start creating and developing, something that you feel a part of and you feel that represents you and your community or your family or your segment of the marketplace. And so And then obviously, if you want to join the board, obviously that's yes, it controls the purse strings, but it has the accountability to fill up the coffers, because the membership dollar doesn't do it. I can tell you that. And so, yeah, and how do you then balance those commercial needs, right? So how do you balance the needs of your members versus the needs of your sponsors versus the needs of all the other peripherals within the industry as well. So it's an interesting one, and I encourage anybody to get involved. If you're prepared to give the time, people are prepared to give you this position and give you the responsibility and accountability to deliver something. So, yeah.
So when we look at things like competition and whatnot, we've got MICE coming up.
Yep.
Tell me, what kind of a relationship and involvement does ASCA have with MICE? Because MICE is a privately owned event.
Yep.
So how does the relationship with ASCA and MICE work?
So Prime Creative Media owns Melbourne International Coffee Expo. It's their trade show, essentially. And ASCA is the content that is delivered, essentially. So our national competitions are held at the Melbourne International Coffee Expo. It's a symbiotic relationship, and it's probably one that I didn't quite understand fully, and I had a different opinion when I on the outside looking in than I do from the inside looking out. And so to understand the relationship best, it's probably easy to say that. So Prime Creative Media is a corporate sponsor of ASCA's with a sponsorship agreement like everybody else, which defines the roles and responsibilities and the benefits that ASCA gets and obviously what Prime gets. Now, as far as that relationship goes, basically we get one of their employees 2 days a week, essentially, or two of their employees 1 day a week, to help us with all the admin side of running the business or running the association. As a purely volunteer, that's a hell of a lot of work. And so we don't have the resources to employ somebody. And so that's the benefit we get from their overall sponsorship. We also get, articles and beans. We get to use their newsletter, a heap of other.
They own that publication, right?
Yeah, they own Bean Scene and Global Coffee Report. So, but we do get articles and we get ways to talk to broader people outside of our membership base, all that sort of stuff. But really, the purest way of looking at the value that ASCA gets is having staff without any cost.
Okay.
So we don't spend any of our sponsorship dollars on employing anybody. It's purely volunteer, and that's probably our biggest benefit throughout the year. For MICE and Melbourne International Coffee Expo, the benefit is, and it's really hard for a lot of people to get this through the head, but realistically, we don't, as an association, have the capability as professionals or the time to put on something of that size and scale ourselves. So we could go out to tender, we could do all these things, but there is a clear alignment of, specialty coffee competitions and nationals and that crown and the jewel, the jewel and the crown sort of position with the premier sort of trade show, just coffee. You could look at doing Food Services Australia, you can look at doing fine foods and all those sort of things. But again, you're not talking to just coffee, you're talking to a broader segment of the marketplace. And so there's an alignment there of brand, but there's also that a pure alignment of logistics. And so we have a contract with Melbourne International Coffee Expo and Prime to have all the infrastructure that we need to put on our nationals. So that's, the actual stands themselves, the flooring, the back walls, the wash down areas, all that sort of stuff costs money. We'd either have to pay someone like Prime to help us deliver it, or we'd have to go out and find a third party to help us deliver it as well. So it's kind of a alignment of goals of what we're all trying to achieve, and that's worked, I believe, better now than it probably has in the past. But that may only just be my perception because I now understand it better.
Okay.
and I understand the clear benefits on both sides. And as I said, it is really quite symbiotic. Not to say that that's a fixed thing for forever, but at the moment it does serve a purpose and allows us to get on with the business of actually delivering benefits to our members, and also delivering the best level of competition to allow our competitors the best chance of progressing onto the worlds and winning a world. That's really what the outcome we're trying to get is.
And is that the goal of ASCA? Is the goal of ASCA to, because you've only got limited resources. So if you were to say what the main agendas of ASCA are, would you say it's progressing the Australian coffee professional or our industry onto the world stage? Is it about helping the sustainability of our supply chain? Is it about promoting business within Australia, specialty coffee businesses within Australia? Is it about representing the agenda of big business versus little business? Like, what would you say are the main agendas of ASCA?
I think that's evolving, but essentially our remit is to continue to involve and innovate the specialty coffee market, or the coffee market here in Australia.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, that's what I mean. So that's very broad, right? So, and to understand what it currently does, you have to understand its history. And so ASCA, like most of these things, was designed to promote the Australian coffee market to the world stage. And so to put us on to the world stage back in the early 2000s, we needed to invest in the competitions, because that was the way for us to, as a brand, to go and promote Australian coffee to the world. That also allowed individuals to promote themselves to the world and to build their own personal brands. That also allowed here in Australia the original founders and roasting members to promote their own brands, but also give them brand separation in their current markets. So if you're a roaster and no one knows what specialty coffee is, or why they should spend $4 for yours when down the road was $3, or $30 a kilo, $20 a kilo, how do you build that brand separation? How do you build that story and that narrative? And ASCA essentially was one of the ways to do that. So, like, I am a member of ASCA. I'm a specialty. I'm certified. Like, I'm part of that community, and that gives you the ability to get a commercial edge within a market.
So what? You get a sticker, you put it on the front of your cafe, and everyone knows that you're an ASCA member.
They can walk around. Yeah, they can walk around. Look, I'm part of the Australian Specialty Coffee Association. No one knows what that is, but it sounds fancy.
I was just going to say, how many fucks were given about that?
Pretty much enough for it to give them a commercial edge, essentially. And I'd say that worked, and it worked in its current form. And to be honest, is still probably the main driver of ASCA as well, is to help individuals promote their own personal brands. Coffee companies and roasters promote their own businesses and their brands, and give them that separation within a very fragmented but also very highly competitive market. But then also to promote the Australian coffee industry to the world.
I imagine,
I think
on that, I imagine that works better for the bigger companies than it does for the littler companies. I'm assuming that for big companies, they might get to use the logo on their bags or talk about it. Is that right?
Actually, so I'd say originally it worked best for the small guys. I would say it still works best for the medium-sized enterprise. So when I say medium, I'd say they're between 2.5 ton a week roasting to probably 10 ton a week. They're a decent business. They've gotten over that massive hurdle of going from that 1 to 2.5 is usually a fairly the hard road through there, because you're usually reinvesting and doubling down. But once you're between that 5 to 10 mark, you've got the infrastructure to scale up and down quite easily. I think it helps those guys probably more so. They've got reps on the road. It gives them, they kind of feel like a big business, but they're kind of small enough to be agile still, and allows them to have brand separation. I think it helps them the most. But having said that, it needs to evolve for more than that. So part of that is to get higher levels of members so we can communicate to more people within our industry. The way to do that is to provide more values to them as individuals. And then you can start building on your remit to further increase what ASCA does and what it achieves. And so that can be, as you build your profile and your community and your tribe, you can then start impacting much broader things within the marketplace, or even more granular things. And a quick example of that's like large macroeconomic sort of issues, be it GST reviews, which is, for those in other parts of the world, goods and services tax, or like a VAT, or a sales tax.
Sales tax here in the US, yeah.
How do you then start helping to not necessarily control, but like influence the way that those reviews go, or how that those issues can be resolved
legislatively? You're talking about?
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So every year there's a review through Parliament that goes down to a committee, and they do a review, and then they come back with recommendations around what taxes should be defined, or what taxes should be applied to what,
and excluded, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So those issues affect all of us within the industry, so we should have a say within how those are reformed. And that's the only way to really get to that level of influence, is by having a much larger soapbox to talk from.
Yep.
And that usually comes from a much larger presence in marketplace. So that's brand, and that's promoting ASCA as a brand. There's ways to do that.
And intention, right?
How many people? Yeah, and how many people you talk to as well.
Yeah.
So how many members do you have? It will define how much credibility you have when you go into those conversations.
And I guess the reason that I ask all of that is because we do constantly hear people, particularly the last few years, saying, "What the fuck does ASCA do?" And I don't mind asking those questions, because it's a legitimate question. At the end of the day, we want to know what a supposed governing body is doing. And I think it's not unfair to say that in the past ASCA has dropped the ball, and we've spoken pretty extensively, you and I, on that, and we've spoken publicly about it at these conferences that we did, and the people have said that they would love to be a part of ASCA if they understood what it did and what value that they would get out of that. And there is an enormous diversity in an understanding of what people would like to get out of ASCA. And so the reason I'm asking you those kinds of questions is so that anyone that's listening to this can get an understanding of what the intention of you as the new president, what your intention is, and what the intention of the board is. And because with every new board, ASCA could take a different direction in its intention.
Yep. And that's why we took some steps to change our constitution so that we have some level of continuity between outgoing and incoming boards and through the office bearers. And so that was a clearly defined strategy to help mitigate that risk. But the thing that I'd probably say to most of the members, and we are going to go out to our current members, but also go out to our database of just newsletter recipients who could have been members, might have been previously, chose not to renew for whatever reason, or just never been a member, to ask what exactly they want. Because to be honest, a member-based association, what it does is defined by what the members want. And unless you know what the members want and what action they would like to see, and then you have those individuals who tell you also want to provide the manpower to get it done, it's very hard to get anything, or to do anything in particular. So that's probably the part that I'd recommend everybody have a think about, but then also get in contact with ASCA and jump on the website, go to info@asca.com. It's AASCA.com, and tell us. And if you're really passionate about something in particular and you want to help us achieve it, then by all means, like as I said to a couple of guys, I'll find a way to fund it. Just what I can't do is find a way to pay someone to do it.
Yep.
In like employees, that's just not where we're at the moment as an organisation. Maybe in the future we get to the size of the SCA and run more like a for-profit business with proper employees and all that sort of stuff, and have that sort of larger kind of mentality. Maybe not. But at the moment, you need both the idea but also the passion to help deliver it. And if there's a money question, then we can go out and solve that.
And I think that something that has been feeding that is a lack of confidence, like as we said, that, the last couple of however long, there has been a lack of confidence in, people just not understanding what you guys are achieving, or is the only agenda to represent competition and whatnot. And I know that ASCA is very heavily focused on competition. I understand you guys are doing a bunch of stuff on developing the judging program and doing all that kind of stuff. And it's super important, especially given the direction of, especially in Australia, because when I started out in specialty coffee, it was very uncool to compete. Very uncool to compete. It's the flip side of that now. And everyone wants to compete, particularly with the influx of the Asian community coming into specialty coffee. And so, of course, there needs to be a representation of making sure that we are represented on the world stage. And especially Australia has just got such a rich talent for coffee professionals. But, I think moving forward, it would be a viable option, let's put it that way, for people to dip their toe into becoming members and asking questions. I had some people when I was in Melbourne saying, what the fuck are ASCA doing? This was not at the conference. This was aside from that, some people, some older members of the coffee community, let's just say, what the fuck are ASCA doing? And I'm like, what would you like them to be doing? And people would say some interesting things, like, I would like to see them representing the coffee supply chain issues a lot better. And so my response to anyone that ever says something like that is, why aren't you a member and why aren't you on the board? I'm not interested in being on the board of anything because I'm busy with 2 businesses, and so therefore I don't challenge anybody on their decision making with regards to that. But I encourage anybody who does want to be a part of decision making and influencing the direction that any association or industry wants to go in, get involved.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so to those kind of really big chunky issues, I find a lot of the things you'll get as a comment, when someone actually breaks it down and says, what can you actually achieve? That's not something that can be achieved by ASCA necessarily at this point in time. Maybe in the future. We can definitely not own the actual accountability of it, right?
Well, you just can't. It's owned by business.
It's too big.
It requires a board of its own that, it's huge. Yeah, anyway, go on.
But what we can do though is go, if that's really important to our members, what can we do to help start? It's about doing it in iterations, in steps. And so, okay, this is my current capabilities and current position, and this is important to us. What can we do to help either our members or this particular problem that we're really passionate about? For example, in the coffee supply and stuff, I've had many many conversations with people using blockchain to help try and solve these issues. One of those is Bex 360. There's Veridoc. There's a couple other ones from the wine industry trying to do it. They've all got different takes on it, and I've had many conversations around these sort of issues. But realistically, private enterprise is going to solve those issues, not necessarily ASCA. The SCA could potentially help define what needs to be solved, but realistically, private enterprise is going to solve it, because that's how most innovation occurs.
Right.
Because there will be a financial capitalism 101, right? It's going to be, they will find a way to solve this issue that it benefits people in a financial way down the track throughout the supply chain.
But you see, somewhere where I see that ASCA could play a really important role in that is, and you and I spoke about this in Melbourne over dinner. I think we were having vegan burgers or something like that, doing that.
The Big Mac that wasn't Big Mac.
It was fucking delicious, though.
It was very weird to have
a vegan version of a Big Mac. Anyway, so the role that I can see that ASCA could play in something like that is, approaching whatever it is that's the government body about having the conversation with the public, or launching a marketing campaign that helped the general population start to understand the difference between the C market, the specialty market, and what it is to pay a farmer a fair price, or what it is to pay a fair price for your coffee. Further to that, we hear a lot of cafes complaining about the cost of a cup, the sell price of a cup of coffee, and how they're incapable of being, well, not incapable, they're unable to charge more than around about $3.50, $4 for a cup of coffee. And how, while costs have accelerated over the last 15 years, the cost of a cup of coffee, the retail price of a cup of coffee has not. They can maybe budget 5 cents a year. And even then, everyone loses their mind over that. And I wonder if ASCA couldn't play a role. I'm not saying I have any solution for it, but if you needed someone to help project manage something like that, I would be interested in helping that. And that's the kind of role that I see that ASCA could play, because you're the middleman. Well, you're not the middleman, you're the neutral zone. Because if, let's say Cafe Imports decided to launch that campaign, they have an agenda. If Condesa Colab launched that marketing campaign, they would have an agenda. Whereas if ASCA launched something like that, your neutral territory, you have the agenda of wanting to just improve the industry rather than to improve the business model of any one particular player in the game.
That's the fact that we do have a vested interest, and it is blatantly obvious. We are the Australian we're the Australian Coffee Association, right? We're the industry body. So therefore, we have an agenda and we have a bias
towards specialty coffee.
Oh no, or just the bias to improve the economics of our members, which would be cafe owners and roasteries, right? So,
which would incentivize more people to want to become. Which would incentivize more people to want to become members.
Yeah, but also I think the person you're trying to convince down the line to pay more money was, the Australian market is very cynical at best. So
that's a diplomatic way of putting it.
And would see immediately that we have a vested interest in discount we're trying to say, right? So from that side of things, actually, it's something that I worked up from a Silver Chef side of things probably 2 years ago, and I had to shelve for various reasons, but and I'd still like to get it up and running. But I think, again, it goes back to private enterprise being able to help solve some of these issues. And so from a Silver Chef side, we'd worked through a program of good coffee for good. Mm-hmm. And so purely a marketing campaign or a PR exercise to really not explain in the terms that the industry always explains it to ourselves, C price versus, commercial price versus, the actual commodity price, which is really tied to the oil price because it's about how much it costs you to move things, versus, what's a livable wage, how much you're paying at farm gate, all that sort of really nuanced language and only means something to us. I think we get, and this is just human nature, we all get trapped in that sort of cycle of that's how we think about things. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it needs to probably not come from ASCA or not come from the industry. We come from someone just to the side who has a vested interest in seeing success, a bit like Silver Chef, for example, would come from one of those people promoting it or putting it out there, but putting it out there purely in a way that resonates with the person you're trying to convince. And so that particular program was designed around what's in it for the punter, or what's in it for the person consuming this cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. What is going to drive them to take their dollars and spend it with the person we'd like them to spend it with. So the only way to do that is to really talk to someone's what's in it for them. And the easiest way to do that, and one of the most effective, is talk around the FOMO or fear. So, for example, hello, Mr. Consumer. You really like that coffee. Yes, that's your favorite coffee. You drink it all day. Yep, I'm a coffee connoisseur. This is the best coffee around. Cool. you will not be able to drink that coffee anymore unless you go and pay $4.50 at this particular cafe or someone who supplies this particular brand, because they are investing in the supply chain, which will enable you to continue to drink that coffee into the future. So the fear of loss would be the driver, the economic driver there, or the actual psychological driver, I should say, to then get the economic driver. And so you need to have that first to get consumer dollars to move to outlets or cafes that are getting supplied by the right roasteries. Or if they walk in and go, oh, I've heard about this thing, why don't you have it? And that is then a economic pressure or driver on the cafe owner, the roaster who is doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And then how do I find that person? So finding, and I know people have tried doing with, fair trade, all those other certifications, but that's going from one direction. It's going from a validation direction of at the
it's a warm and fuzzy. It's not actually doing anything. It's
like all certifications will make up 15% of the marketplace. They have, don't be wrong, they are very valuable, but they have a time and a place, and they have a limit in what they can reach because they're coming from origin. They're not coming from consumer to origin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The economics actually drive the other way. So you need to be able to find ways to push the other way, not try and pull. Everything we've always tried to do is a pull strategy, which is very hard to do and it's very costly, and it's hard to scale, and it's hard to get done quickly. You need to find a really good push strategy from a marketing and PR position to push the economics down the line in the pathways that you deem as the most appropriate according to your ethical or sustainability goals. And so I think that's why private enterprise still has a very high place to play in that, because it's bloody expensive to do, and someone like Asker doesn't have the money to do it, but they do have the credibility to give it viability. Does that make sense?
It does. And so this is where I think Asker could use all of us as its marketing channel. And hear me out here. So if Asker created the campaign, right? And I believe that there are enough people within our community that Asker could get the campaign created for pretty much nothing. So the graphics and the ideas and et cetera, get it all created for nothing. But then get it out to us to push to our communities so that cafes were taking a organizational campaign that was created by the Australian specialty coffee industry that was like a 15-second or 30-second cartoon video, whatever, animated, whatever, that talks about this kind of stuff. And then it was a resource that was given to all the cafes out there in Australia that then blasted this out through their social media. That then becomes the marketing mechanism, a free marketing mechanism, because let's say each one of them has 1,000 people on their Instagram, which we all know a lot of brands have far more than that. If we were all able to blast it through the businesses for one, and to, let's say, the employees blasted it through their social media, what we're doing is we're not just doing the same fucking thing that most of specialty coffee does, which sells to the kings amongst gods of coffee, right? That's where we always fail. What we want to be doing is selling to the general public. And so if we're able to blast that idea out to the general public, but have it birthed from a association, and then you use the cafes and employees of the industry to then be the amplifier of that message, I think that could be a cost-effective and forward-thinking way, progressive way of getting a message out there that needs to be got out there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'd probably say that me personally, just thinking about the psychology of the consumer at that position, right? So remember, that's still coming from a self-serving position. That's still about what's in it for us as a cafe owner or as an employee of a coffee business. And so if you're pushing that message out, it's still 100% what's in it for me. I think you should come and buy from me because of these reasons. Does that make sense?
Well, not if the message is, how do we...
So
So not if.
Sorry.
Well, my response to that is that not if the message is about coffee in general. So basically, if the message is we need to make sure that we pay farmers a fair price, and we need to make sure that we pay cafe owners a fair price. And if you love coffee and you want to make sure that you're drinking coffee in 10 years' time, then what we need to do is we need to fix the supply chain issues that exist. And by the way, this is what the supply chain issues are. Now, if we can get that message, was that Optimus Prime? Hello?
I've got a fire going on.
Oh, really? I thought that was Optimus Prime, like a ringtone or something.
Just a fire.
A fire drill?
About to go off. Yeah, off. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so that's my point, is if we have a more generalized marketing campaign that's telling people very concisely and very rationally without over sensationalizing what's going on, because we really do have a problem. And I've got people from World Coffee. Oh, that's interesting. And we have someone coming on from World Coffee Research in a couple of weeks to talk about this more at length. But we definitely have a supply chain issue. We've been speaking about it at length on the podcast. And if I feel very passionately about the idea that if we're going to be having associations like ASCA and SCA, that as people in the community, we're going to look to organizations like ASCA to represent not only the cool things like competition, but to get the message out about what the challenges are of the future of the industry. And I know that costs a lot of money, but perhaps there's a way that there could be a symbiotic relationship there that helps that message get out.
Yeah, I don't, obviously I agree. It's just a matter of what you do first and when and how. So the reason why I was saying it's very self-serving if we just go out and promote it, I think that's 100% the second thing you do. You have it within, so from an ASCA point of view, we can invest in putting information and resources on our website so that if people find it, they can educate themselves, because again, that's them wanting to find out. If we go and promote it, and the way that you promote it's really, really important, because not to sound really cynical, but all humans do not give a shit around the what happens to somebody else down the line they can't touch, feel, or see, or if they think it's self-serving. Does that make sense?
But
what they do,
unless we can show them how it's going to affect them.
I agree, but that's still too altruistic. It's still like if that was the case, then every charity would be so well funded there wouldn't be any need to sell the thing, right?
I tend to disagree, Kieran. And I don't mean to disagree for any reason other than I think that we as an industry have let ourselves get away with this for too long, in the sense that we keep assuming that somebody else is eventually going to find a way to make this a warm and fuzzy way to get to the public, and we're running out of time. We have to do something now about this problem, because we really are. I have had a number of guests on this podcast that are cutting down their coffee trees because it's more cost effective after generations of coffee farmers. Absolutely.
Right. So my point to this, and don't take this wrong, like I'm 100% with you, right? I'm very passionate about that. This is a hugely important issue that we do need to solve as an industry. I think, and because I see so many roasters on a weekly basis, I think the vast majority of the specialty scene, especially the specialty scene and ASCA members, do actually already push out a lot of information as much as possible to try and illustrate those issues. And I just see if it's not an effective way to do it. as a first initial way of communicating the value proposition, right? So what I mean by that is I think it's a great way as a second tier wave or second iteration piece, which follows on from a very purely mainstream media campaign that is driven towards exactly the person who's consuming the product and trying to get them to basically go, not explain the whole issues with the supply chain, don't go granular, and just say, you want to drink good coffee? You need to go at this place, and this is how to identify them. And if you want to drink good coffee for the rest of your time, this is how you identify that person, and go and just get them to start moving their buying habits and taking their economic power to the places that are doing the right thing. And so that's once you've got that, and you've got that slight amount of education, which unfortunately is going to take one repetition, which is usually costly, because you've got to keep repeating the same message and pushing that out in the marketplace to get true behavioral change. Then you can align all of those, all the stories that our guys are already talking about and explaining. If you've actually got someone coming into the cafe as a cafe owner going, hey, I've been reading this thing on news.com.au or like the Australian, and I need to, it says I got to look for this symbol to say that, you know, you're doing the right thing and your supply chain is doing the right thing so I can drink delicious coffee in the future. They go, yeah, I am. Or they walk into their local cafe and say, mate, I've heard about this thing. Are you part of that movement? And they go, oh, no, I'm not. And that prompts them to go and find out or change suppliers to someone who is doing the right thing. And so the problem I've always found with the way that we've communicated the message is it's really powerful. It means a lot from the farm gate to the green bean supplier to the roaster. But once you get to the roaster, communicating that to a cafe owner who doesn't have an economic driver to shift their buying patterns to buy to it because there's no benefit to them after that point, that's really hard to justify. When you know a cafe owner's potentially struggling already, they're on the, you know, they don't want to change unless they have to, or unless there's a driver from their consumer base to change. And I think that's where we sometimes fall over, is it means 100% to the roaster. The cafe owner potentially wants to buy into it, but doesn't see economic benefit for doing that. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. And I think what you've helped me realize is that we have to do it. Map It Forward has to do it because, and in hearing you talk about that, what I've realized is we probably have to get a Kickstarter and fund a Kickstarter so that we can hire an animator that can create us a 30-second video that we give.
What I'll do is I'll shoot you over all the stuff I've already got, and you'll have a look. And there's a full, not a full-blown plan, but there's a half skeleton plan there of how much money it would take, I think, to get it done in the Australian marketplace for starters, and with all the skeleton bits and pieces around it to communicate the value prop.
Well, the difference is I have I have a different approach to it than having to getting it done just in the Australian market. I basically want to create a 30-second video that we can push out to cafes and roasters all over the world, that we can have interpreted into a bunch of different languages, that can teach people, one, what's going on with the supply chain, and two, the fact that their ability to drink coffee is currently being compromised. And if we can create a video that doesn't promote Map It Forward, it's got nothing to do with Map It Forward. It is about educating the end user on what the fuck is going on. And if we can help them understand that and then give that to all cafes, because we are getting contacted by an astronomical number of people that are saying, how do I'm hearing you talk about these problems on your podcast. How do we educate our customers? And I'm like, I have no idea at this point. I think that it should be the associations that are giving you the material to be and the scripts and things to be able to do that. And I think that that's just too hard for everybody. So if I can crowdfund paying an animator to create this 30-second video and get a bunch of people involved in determining what the messaging should be, and then we then take that and create a marketing campaign that involves for $0 that basically has a buy-in from cafes for $0, but just a commitment that they will start sharing that campaign on their social media, I think that we can actually start the beginnings of what could be the shift that we're looking at creating in the front end of the supply chain rather than the back end. Because listen, I was on a podcast, a financial investing podcast, talking about the C market, which I am highly underqualified to be talking about. But I'd been on the podcast before and they consider me their coffee expert. And I was very clear to them that I'm the most underqualified coffee influencer to be talking about this. Nonetheless, it had no effect on their decision-making. We spoke about it, and I got contacted by so many people in the finance sector wanting to have conversations about how they can better use their buying power to support the specialty coffee industry. And that was huge.
That's probably my my point to the video stuff, right? So again, I get what you do need to convey the story of the effect on the human being down the line and all that sort of messaging. What we usually fail to do is connect the dots to make it very easy for the money to flow to the areas that we think it should. And that's always been the failure of every messaging campaign that anybody's ever tried to do, is because you can go out and say, look, unless you're going to unless you spend more money on coffee, you're not going to be able to drink forever. Well, that's not really telling the actual consumer what to do. Joining the dots is very important. So, yes, I want to drink this delicious coffee and I want to drink it for a long period of time. How do I ensure where I'm going to spend that money is going to have the impact that you're trying to portray, right? And that's always where we've fallen down, because it's easy to get into greenwashing. There's easy to get into many, many different things. That's what certifications we're trying to solve from certain perspectives, and that's kind of the missing link for me. Is how do you can convey a story of the trials and tribulations of the supply chain, and you can get somebody excited. You can get that sense of urgency for them to go and do something about it. But then the failing is, how do you then join the dots for them to go, okay, cool, I'm really excited. What do I do?
Oh, that part I think is easy. That's the part where through a messaging campaign where you say to them, are you going
to spend at every cafe $5 where they're getting commodity coffee and it's bought at less than seed price? Like that's the problem, right? Like how do you then say, look, no, this person's actually doing the right thing for everybody, and this person, you need to go and ask the question. I can't say
that's the key there.
This person is
arming them with understanding what the right questions are to ask at the cafes that they're going to. So that when we have more people going in and saying, do you guys relationship buy, or do you guys work with roasters who have relationships with the farms that they're buying? Or another question, do you know if a fair price is paid for the green bean that you're buying?
In black hat, because I'm in finance. Cynically, and say yes to that, and there's no way to validate it.
Well,
and that's the last part.
There actually is for places like, if you look at companies like Onyx Coffee Lab, shout out to Andrea and to John Allen from Onyx Coffee Lab, shout out to Mark Dundon from Seven Seeds. These are the kinds of companies that are actually talking about their farm gate price on their website. And what they're doing is that they are being very transparent. Shout out to Phoenix Coffee in Cleveland. These are the kinds of companies that are pioneering and being really progressive by putting the price that they pay for coffee and demonstrating that they are paying a fair price to the farmers.
Black hat's on. Like, my black hat's going to be on for this, because that's cool. They can say whatever they want, but how do I know that's true?
Does it matter that you care? No, I'm not saying does it matter if it's true or not, but do you really believe that the consumer is looking to prove or disprove the information. At the end of the day, with like Phoenix has a full transparency report up there.
Oh, no. So the reason for that comment is actually not around, is the consumer going to go out and validate it? I don't think they will. And to be honest, to get validation, true validation, that's why I was looking at the blockchain sort of technology as a potential solve.
Which right now is all bullshit. Like the amount I've been looking into, I've been trying to get somebody of any credibility onto this podcast with credible blockchain technology that really does have honest transparency, and we haven't got it yet in the coffee industry.
The closest one I've found out of the 8 that I've actually had conversations with, and in-depth conversations, is probably Bex 360, to be honest. But there's still a ways from solving the whole thing. They're in the process. They're just not quite there yet. But yeah, there's other ones that are all trying to do it differently. But the reason why I point out that question around is it true is because it's not so much for the consumer to validate, but if it is easily to replicate and be disingenuous, then it is easy to greenwash. So
what do you mean by greenwash?
Should then be high. So basically, like when charities or like environmental issues basically get hijacked by people not actually doing the right thing, they just say they are, because there's no way for anybody to really validate if they are or if they aren't.
Right, and people in the coffee industry will do that.
And just think about the word specialty.
Yep.
Because that's 100%. Like, so for me, that's always been still an area of mine, is the way that people define specialty coffee. It's on a green school, which no one beyond the roaster actually knows anything about, let alone knows what it is.
But that would be the point of an education campaign, right? That would have to be all encompassing and that would be the challenge of it in creating the campaign.
Again, it allows someone out there, and there's plenty of them, that will latch on and go, look, hey, I'm an old first wave generation roaster, roasting Robusta and filler, and it's maybe my business today, and I'm just rebrand, and I'm going to call myself specialty now and get some really sexy marketing, and I'll latch on to this campaign. You'll grow my business for me not doing the right thing. And that's always, for me, been the risk, is will it actually reward?
Legitimate.
Yeah, will it actually reward, and will the money flow to the right people for the right reasons? And that happens with, like, especially charities, and like in the greenwashing sort of space, and charity washing is, like you see all these people marketing charities, and the first question I normally ask them is, how much, if I give you
what percentage? What percentage of
that dollar makes it to market?
Yeah.
To the cause that I'm trying to support. And a lot of them will say, like, 20, 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, for example, Opportunity International, one of the ones, Silver Chefs, if $1, they leverage it up and get $5 in market.
Wow. Is that through investing?
So when they do, yeah, so they basically, when, say, we donate 100 grand into India, that will land into a bank, and then that gets multiplied up, so it gets factored. And so then they'll be able to lend out $500,000 based on that $100,000 into micro loans, to then support communities and to give a hand up, not a handout. So those kind of questions for me are really important, and that's always been my issue without any validation step, the ability for bad actors to come in and hijack a really good campaign or a really good groundswell movement and take it and reward the wrong activity or reward the wrong behavior.
Yeah. And look, I'm confident that there are enough people that are passionate about making this a success that we could probably create some kind of a committee that was aligned in its agenda to just get a message out there that made sense, and create a solution or a mechanism for not completely eliminating greenwashing, because we can't, but we could minimize it. So perhaps doing things like having a register of, having a register of cafes that do actually pay fair price, farm gate.
You're like, I'll send you all the stuff I have, because it's exactly that. It's all a framework there for you. So if anybody wants to run with it, I've been trying to get it up for a while. Just the funding side has eluded me at this point. Having said, I think Aska's actually probably able to maybe give it a nudge. But I think it needs to be more than just mine and a B Corp consultant, Tim O'Brien's sort of brainchild. I think it needs to go out into the marketplace and into the actual industry to get industry input and validation and stress tested and picked apart and all the rest of it before it actually became a thing.
I hear you. That's why I'm thinking that it needs to be something that's probably funded by the industry. Through
supporters of the industry.
Well, definitely supported by the industry, and that's an absolute
supporters of the industry. So that's why so we people who we intrinsically have a vested interest in the industry being the best it can be, because that's where we get our revenue from.
The more successful the industry, the more successful Silver Chef is, conspiring to each other's success.
Exactly, and there's plenty of big businesses that have the capability and the funding to be able to help get something up that like this up, I think. And that's why I always go back to private enterprise needs to be part of the solution, because they have a vested interest in it actually working.
Well, let's look at me connecting with you on, I mean, honestly, I'm happy for Map It Forward to own something like this. If we can find the funding through crowdfunding and getting some sponsorship around this, I've got access to the people and the voice through the podcasts and whatnot, to bring together the right people to execute this and make sure that the messaging is correct. And then get this far and wide through free marketing. I would happily own this project if you could help me. You know, the thing that I'm not good at, and I'm really stepping into my strength and my vulnerability by just owning the shit that I'm not that I'm not great at. And I spoke to you about this last year, is that, you know, raising money is not something that I'm great at. It is something that you're exceptional at. So if you could help me understand how to do that, then I'm very good at bringing people together around and the knowledge around this. So maybe we could work together to help get this funded and that kind of thing.
Yeah, for me, it's, to be honest, it's one of those things where I don't care who gets it up as long as it gets up and it's effective.
And I'm happy to own getting it up. Like, my project management experience really lends itself to getting a project like this off the ground. And I know that there are so many people out there that want to get involved in a project that is actually going to ensure the long-term survival of their industry.
We all have a vested interest in it. It always amazes me that, it amazes me on two folds. One, that there's so many passionate individuals out there committing their time and their resources to these issues, and it's not having an impact like they'd like it to. And there's a whole heap of people with their head in the sand who don't give a shit, but they should. And they actually have the capacity and the ability to actually have real impact and real change.
And for anyone who's listening to this episode, if you are somebody that does want to get involved in this project, can you send an email to support@mapitforward.org, put your hand up in any capacity that you want to get involved, whether it be admin, whether it be through on the creative side, whether it be in any way, shape or form, sponsorship, whatever. I'm going to be committed to putting together a team that we can help run with this. And if we can get the funding, it would be a paid team to do this as well. And
it's actually one of those things. It's almost like a bit like Elon Musk, actually. I'll take one out of his book. It should really be crowdsourced or open source. Because, as I said, we've got the framework. I've actually got a framework that we put together probably 2.5 years ago.
Great.
How to get this probably work in the Australian
Let's run with it.
We just never got to the point where we could actually get it off the ground. So for various reasons, but if we put it out there and someone can actually get it to work and with all the checks and balances and it's industry led and validated, then I think that's only a positive for everybody.
And that should be the mechanism of an organization like Map It Forward. You know, we're Switzerland in this. We survive if the industry thrives. We're not trying to sell a particular brand of coffee. We're not trying to support a particular demographic. We want everyone's success. That our measure of success is by making the industry successful. And so I guess we make sense as the place to do something like this.
Yeah, and obviously from an ASCA point of view, I think, as I said before, I hadn't really thought about it because it's been a while since I went through the stuff. I think there's definitely a position where SCA or ASCA or all the regional associations can all get behind and give it credibility within their own markets.
Yeah.
The strongest commodity that any association has within any market is credibility. And we provide that through our brand and through the way that we can position that within a market. So, I think it's never going to be solved by the one individual. I think it's going to be solved by the community. But it's just finding the right way to get it to work together to get, realistically, it's about changing consumer behavior. And that takes a lot of effort, and you've got to do it from a point of view that's got nothing to do with you and the cause that you want. That gets solved by changing the behavior of a consumer purely for their selfish reasons. And so that's what you've got to focus on first and foremost, is you make it so that they want to do something, which then gives you the benefit to the cause that you're trying to solve, right? So, yes, you can link those two and you can talk about it, but that cannot be the main driver. Otherwise, you limit the amount of people that you'll be able to affect.
Yeah, I'm very excited. My brain is racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour of, all the people that we can get involved in to do this, because pretty much all of them have said to me, how are we going to fix this? Who's going to own this problem? And I guess we have to. We are the logical place to own this, because it affects pretty much every single professional direction of our industry.
I agree, and I try to convince my board and executive team to give me $200,000 to try and get it up and running, which was a hard conversation to have for a publicly listed company. So, because there's no real added direct benefit to my company, essentially. So,
but the long-term benefit could be amazing.
100%. But I think, as I said, like, it can't be owned by one individual, one company. I think it needs to be a crowd.
The needs to own it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, this is something that I've been having individual conversations with a bunch of stakeholders in this about how we can address this. And I think this is going to be the project that ties it all together. So, which is going to be great. Awesome.
Well, on that note,
I was just going to say, on that note, have a great MICE.
Thank you. I'm super excited, actually. Anybody who's listening or wants to come along, or is in Australia or in New Zealand or in Asia or in America or in Europe, who is coming to MICE, I think our national competitions will be outrageously good this year. We've reinvested again.
How exciting!
Yeah, I'm really excited with the way things are going, but also I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll have the technology piece fixed so that by MICE we'll have our member benefits program up and running, and a few other bits and pieces, and we can start obviously getting more engagement from new members as to what they would like ASCA to do in the future.
That's exciting. And if we can get involved in that and help out in any way, do let me know, especially with all the stuff that we've got coming up, the book, and I'm sure we could figure out a way to help ASCA members get a discount on the book and all that kind of stuff, if that's helpful to your members. Let us know.
Anything that is direct benefit to a member, I'm always interested in.
Great. Awesome. Cool. Kieran, thank you so much for your time. Always wonderful talking to you, friend.
Always. I do enjoy our conversations. I'm going to steal that directly out of what was it, The Last Samurai or something?
I love our conversations. So thanks. I feel like one of the really valuable things for me out of coming to Australia last year was you and I connected, and we got to be friends, and I got to understand a lot of what your agenda is about. And I'm excited for the future of ASCA now that you're president. And I really do, in my heart, I know that your intentions are the exact kind of thing that I would want to see from the president of ASCA. And so I'm really hopeful, and I'm definitely an advocate for you and what you're trying to achieve.
Well, I appreciate that. And
you're welcome,
obviously
mate.
The other way around, and I love the fact that someone's actually, it struck me as just so obvious that there was no one doing this. When you actually suggested them and had Map It 4, it was like, how has no one been doing this before? Like, why is this not a thing already?
Well, it is now.
Yeah. So
fingers crossed, it's going to just keep growing and growing. It's at the moment, it's ridiculous, the exponential growth that we're experiencing with the podcast. And I couldn't be more grateful, for everyone that listens to the podcast and people who are gracious enough to come on the podcast and support the events that we're doing. It's really awesome.
Nice. Keep it up, and hopefully you'll get feedback, and then you'll be able to pass that on to myself as to what we should all be doing.
Fantastic.
Great.
Have an amazing rest of your day, and thanks again for your time, Kieran. Bye, mate. See you later.
Bye.